Germany of Iron and Blood. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 901, Indian Situation. The capital of India, Delhi. It has been almost 4 years since the British and Indian colonial authorities moved the capital from Calcutta back to Delhi in 1912. In another time and space, since then, Delhi has always been the capital of India. In addition, New Delhi has also been built since 1911. It's just that it hasn't been built yet, so the governor's mansion is also located in Delhi. The current governor of India is Baron Charles Harding, and he has another title, that is, Vice Prince of India. Because after the Emperor of India was abolished by the British colonial authorities, the Emperor of India was concurrently held by the King of the British Empire. The Governor of India is also honored as the Deputy King of India, that is, the Supreme Ruler of India. It stands to reason that the wealth of India is known to the whole world. It is undoubtedly a very pleasant thing to be the Governor of India. After all, if you take a little wealth from India during your term of office, it will never be used up in your lifetime. Baron Charles Harding has served as the Governor of India since 1910. Over the past few years, he has collected a lot of wealth. Originally, his term ended this year. However, the British Empire failed in this **** war, lost even its homeland, and could only linger in Canada. Baron Charles Harding's path to ascension was naturally cut off. Originally, he also wanted to return to his home country to serve as a cabinet minister after his term of office ended. After earning enough money for retirement in India, I went back to my native land. But now, everything is in vain. This is why during this period, Baron Charles Harding has accelerated the speed of making money. He has already reported to the British cabinet, hoping to step down from the post of Governor of India as soon as possible. Although India is still relatively far away from Europe, the flames of war will not be able to burn India for a while. However, Baron Charles Harding was still worried. He knew very well that the greedy Germans would never let India go. It won't be long before the Germans will definitely come to India. Unfortunately, his report was not approved. In peacetime, if someone wants to step down as the Governor of India early, he will definitely be called a fool. However, at this time, a fool will succeed the Governor of India. It was precisely because no successor could be found that the British government did not dare to approve the resignation of Baron Charles Harding and asked him to continue serving as the Governor of India so as to obtain more benefits for the British Empire from India. The British cabinet also knew that India might not be able to keep it, so it asked Baron Charles Harding to take over India as much as possible during this period and transport some supplies to Canada. Once 1 degree is lost, there may be problems with the finances of the British government in exile in Canada. At that time, they can only sit and eat. It is obviously impossible to support the British government with the millions of people in Canada alone. After all, in order to be able to take revenge, the British government has been committed to developing its military power. But to develop the army, it requires a huge amount of funds. Baron Charles Harding is also worrying about this matter, especially after learning that the German army has begun to attack Egypt. I'm very worried. He knew that after the Germans took Egypt, it would not be long before they attacked India. By then, will they be able to hold on to India? That's almost impossible. Your Excellency, Lord Nicholson, please see me. The secretary reported. Your Excellency, please come in. In addition, bring in 2 cups of black tea. Baron Charles Harding ordered. Okay, Your Excellency. The secretary nodded and immediately went to prepare. Lord William Nicholson is the commander of the British Army in India and the British Indian Army. It can be said that the entire Indian Army is under his control. He and Baron Charles Harding controlled the military and political power in India. Of course, in terms of position, Baron Charles Harding is the supreme ruler of India, and Lord William Nicholson must obey him. However, in reality, once the battle for India started, Lord William Nicholson, the leader of the military, would have greater power. In order to win the war, Baron Charles Harding needs to cooperate with him. Otherwise, once the battle is lost, the consequences will be very serious, and no one can afford it. Soon, Lord William Nicholson in military uniform walked in. "Good morning, Your Excellency Governor." Lord William Nicholson said. "Hello, my lord." "Hello, please sit down." Baron Charles Harding nodded. Baron Charles Harding didn't start asking until the secretary delivered the black tea. "Your Excellency, how is the situation now?" "Charles," Baron Harding asked. "Your Excellency, the current situation is very bad. The Germans have already captured the Suez Canal. It is estimated that they will enter the Middle East soon. We are retreating from the Middle East, and the indigenous forces in the Middle East do not rely on spectrum. It is almost impossible to resist the Germans." Lord William Nicholson's face was not very good. As the commander of the British Army in India and the British and Indian Army, he was undoubtedly under great pressure. Once the German army launched an attack, he had to lead the troops to the top. As for whether he can withstand the German attack, he is really not sure at all. This war seems to be inevitable. After the British Empire has ruled India for so many years, it seems to be over. Baron Charles Harding sighed. He is obviously not very optimistic about the upcoming war. It's no wonder that the German army is too strong, and the strength of the British and British Indian troops stationed in India is too bad. It is impossible to resist the German attack. Lord William Nicholson nodded. "Yes, Your Excellency Governor. We will do our best. If we can delay here for a longer time, we will be able to evacuate more people and supplies from Australia and other places, go to Canada, and prepare for our resurgence. In the future, maybe we will have a chance to defeat the Germans." India has a population of more than 300 million. We have ruled in India for so many years, and we have a basis for ruling. If we operate well, it may not be possible to turn India into a quagmire of war. At that time, the Germans will be deeply trapped in the here. They are constantly consuming their national strength. In that case, we will all be heroes of the British Empire, said Baron Charles Harding. Unable to leave office, Baron Charles Harding also thought about it. "Since you can't leave, let's do our part for the British Empire." Anyway, he has transferred most of his wealth to Canada. That money is enough for his family to live comfortably for several lifetimes. Chapter 902, Disaster Strikes. Among the many countries in the world, there are not many countries with great power potential. The United States is undoubtedly a unique one. The barrier between the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean has guaranteed the security of the United States. In addition, there are no powerful countries in the surrounding area, which allows the United States to use all its power for external expansion. It can be said that it is precisely because of these superior conditions that the United States is called the chosen country. The rise of another time-space American empire is inseparable from these factors. India also has the vast potential to become a great power. The land area, huge population base, and the surrounding geographical environment are also very favorable. The tall Himalayas to the north block the enemy. There are also no powerful countries in the surrounding area. It's just that, after all, what is sad about India is that they have been in a state of being conquered from ancient times to the present. The nomadic peoples of Central Asia have repeatedly invaded the south, while the natives of India cannot fight at all and have been in a state of enslavement. It is precisely because of this that the local aborigines in India have always been at the bottom of the social class. On the contrary, those foreign nationalities have always been at the top of society. After the Great Voyage, Western colonists began to invade the world, and India naturally became the target of the colonists' competition and invasion. After a fierce fight among the Western colonists, Britain emerged from it and became the victor, taking control of the whole of India. However, this is not a good thing for Indians. At that time, the British Empire was in full swing. They crazily plundered wealth from India, which further made Britain's national strength continue to rise. The Indian natives also tried to resist many times, but they were all brutally suppressed by the British, especially the Indian uprising in the mid-18th century, although it caused considerable losses to the British colonial authorities. However, the whole of India was also killed in rivers of blood. Since then, although India has also broken out many uprisings, but, in general, a huge part of Indians have been tamed. They have accepted their fate and willingly accepted the exploitation and oppression of the British. Of course, those feudal princes also rode on their heads at the same time. However, after entering the 20th century, Indians are also gradually starting to wake up. Gandhi, Tilak, Jinnah and Nehru are all active people. Except for Jinnah, who is a member of the Green Party alliance, the other three are leaders of the Indian National Congress Party. In order to fight for India, to get rid of British colonial rule, they led the vast majority of Indian people to fight hard. Especially in the World War. After Britain lost the war, many people thought that their chance had come. It's a pity that, even if Britain failed in the war, even the mainland fell. However, the British rule in India still has a strong influence. In addition, most of the people have obeyed the rule of the British, and those feudal princes have also joined the British colonial authorities to form a whole. This makes it very difficult for the Congress Party and other parties to overthrow the British colonial rule. As the largest party in India, the Congress Party has 30 million members. But unfortunately, there are also fierce contradictions within the Congress Party. The moderate faction headed by Gandhi hoped to break away from British colonial rule through peaceful means. However, the radical faction headed by Tilak advocated the overthrow of British colonial rule in extreme ways, even including war. Although, the views of the two factions are different. However, the final purpose is the same. That is to hope to break free from British colonial rule, so that India can become a truly independent country. Mumbai, India, is the largest city in India and the most industrially developed city in India. It has also become the center of the National Congress Party, of course. In the headquarters of the Congress Party, the radical leader Tilak and the moderate leader Gandhi are meeting. In the office, apart from the two of them, only Gandhi's student Nehru was there, and Nehru's duty was to take care of the records. Tilak's attitude has regressed a bit compared to before. He was arrested by the British colonial authorities for leading the worker strike in Mumbai, and imprisoned for 6 years. Perhaps it was because Tilak realized the strength of Britain in prison, so his attitude changed. In August 1914, he also declared his allegiance to the United Kingdom, hoping that in exchange for the United Kingdom to agree to India's autonomy, and then step by step towards independence. It is precisely because of this that the relationship between the radicals and moderates of the Congress Party has eased. However, it seems a bit late now. The British have already failed in this war, and even the mainland has fallen. The British government can only linger in Canada now, and it is difficult to protect itself, let alone give Indians a chance to self-govern or even become independent. Because more powerful colonists are coming soon, and more importantly, the whole of India will soon fall into war. I don't know how many people will die in the war, and I don't know how many people will lose their families because of it. It is precisely because of this that the elites in India are worried one by one. The meeting between Tilak and Gandhi were mainly for this reason. As the leaders of the Indian National Congress, they are naturally obliged to save India from disaster. Mr. Gandhi, India is very dangerous now. The colonial authorities are expanding their armies and preparing for war. Soon, a big war will break out in India. On the Indian peninsula, I'm afraid that there will be bloodshed again. Tilak, his face was full of despair. Is there no way to avoid this war? Gandhi looked compassionate. Although his figure is very thin, he is almost a godlike existence in the minds of most Indians. Tilak shook his head. In the eyes of Western powers, India has always been a piece of fat, and everyone wants to take a bite. Before, Britain was very strong, and other countries had no chance to attack. However, after Britain was defeated by Germany, well, the Germans will never let us go. Their army has already taken Egypt. I'm afraid that they will enter the Middle East in a short time. After taking the Middle East, isn't it India's next turn? Is it possible for us to contact the Germans and ask them to support our autonomy or independence? Nehru asked. This is impossible. The Germans are more greedy than the British. They will never let go of the opportunity to enslave us. Tilak said with great certainty. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 903, Crazy Military Expansion. The faces of Tilak, Gandhi and others are a little ugly. According to Baron Charles Harding, if the war goes wrong, there will probably be further military expansion. This also means that countless Indians will die on the battlefield. This made them a little embarrassment. Freedom and independence are naturally what they yearn for. But if millions of Indians are required to pay for it with their lives, then they have to think about it. After all, this is the life of so many compatriots. Baron Charles Harding saw everyone's performance and suddenly exclaimed in his heart that it was not good. These guys shouldn't retreat because of this, right? In that case, his plan would go bankrupt. Now, he pinned all his hopes on these Indian natives. If they don't fall into the trap, isn't it all for nothing? Gentlemen, if we can resist the German attack this time, then I can promise you that within 3 years the authorities will realize Indian self-government and the Indians will govern India. Within 10 years, the British Empire will allow India to be independent. Charles. Baron Harding once again overweighted. Independence? Will the British Empire allow us to be independent? Tilak exclaimed. Others also looked very shocked. If Baron Charles Harding said that they would be allowed to govern themselves, they still believed it. After all, it was the result of their many years of struggle. But if it is independent, it is undoubtedly a bit far away. Nor did they think the British would agree. Yes, independence. True independence. I have reported it to the cabinet, and the cabinet has agreed. That is, if we can withstand the German attack this time. India, 10 years later, it can gain independence and become a normal country. The British Empire guarantees that it will fulfill its promise and will not interfere in India again. Baron Charles Harding said, Your Excellency, are you sure? Gandhi's voice trembled. After all, that has always been their dream. Now, it looks like it will come true. Yes, I am sure. Baron Charles Harding said with great certainty. In order to fool these Indian natives, Baron Charles Harding went all out this time. Of course, what he said will not be fulfilled in the end. Everything is just a blank check. But it was this kind of empty promise that stunned the Indians. Everyone, there is no such thing as a free lunch in the world. As a colony of the British Empire, if you want to gain independence, you need to pay a price. Now, the British Empire has already set the conditions. Whether you agree or not is up to you. Went on Lord Charles Harding. The leaders of several of the largest parties in India are undoubtedly already moved. Although, fully assisting the British and Indian colonial authorities to resist the German attack will cause heavy casualties to the Indians. However, if independence can be gained as a result, it seems to be very cost effective. Everyone, if we are defeated by the Germans, once the Germans occupy India, then the independence you expect may never be possible. The strength of Germany is stronger than the British Empire. At that time, their control of India will be very strict. Baron Charles Harding continued. The faces of several people suddenly became very ugly. They all believed what Lord Charles Harding said. Germany is much stronger than Britain. Once the Germans occupied India, it would be impossible for them to gain independence again. A powerful Germany will directly suppress their resistance. And they can't do anything about it. For the future of India, I think we must not allow the Germans to occupy India. Otherwise, India will be completely finished. We will never be able to gain independence. Tilak said. He was originally a very radical person, and now the opportunity of independence is in front of him. Of course he will not let it go. Afterwards, Tilak's eyes fell on Gandhi. If Gandhi also agreed, then the opinions of the Congress party would be unified. Gandhi thought for a while, then nodded. Well, for the future of India, necessary sacrifices are inevitable. I agree to cooperate with the authorities. Baron Charles Harding showed a smile on his face. After so much effort, he finally persuaded the two leaders of the National Congress Party. It can be said that his plan has basically succeeded. Mr. Jinnah, what is the attitude of the Green Party Alliance? Baron Charles Harding asked. Although the strength of the Green Party Alliance is much smaller than that of the Congress Party, it is also an indispensable force at this time. Jinnah thought for a while. Since the Congress Party agreed, is there any room for the Green Party Alliance to oppose it? If you object, I'm afraid that you will be regarded as a traitor to India. At that time, India will no longer have their living space. The Green Party Alliance will try its best to cooperate with the authorities. Jinnah said. Okay, that's great. Although the Germans are powerful, if we all unite, we can definitely defeat them. Baron Charles Harding said excitedly. Tilak, Gandhi and others also had joyful expressions on their faces. In their view, India's independence may really succeed this time. They had no idea that all this was just a trap set up by Baron Charles Harding. They who wanted India's independence too much fell into the trap so easily. In order to reassure Tilak, Gandhi and others, Baron Charles Harding even signed an agreement on the spot, confirming that after resisting the German invasion, the British and Indian colonial authorities will realize Indian self-government within 3 years and Indian independence within 10 years. The Indian elites, contented, then went all out to help the authorities. First of all, members of the National Congress Party and the Green Party Alliance, who are of the right age, a large part of them went to the subscription point and joined the British and Indian Army. This caused the number of British and Indian troops to skyrocket by a large amount. Secondly, Tilak, Gandhi and others have given speeches in public many times, declaring that the German Empire has become India's greatest enemy. If India is defeated by the German Empire in this war, India will lose its future. Only by defeating Germany can India have a chance to gain independence. I have to admit that they have a wide range of influence in Indian society. Under their call, a large number of Indian youths enthusiastically signed up to join the army, making the quota of 5 million troops of the British and Indian army full in just 1 week. Chapter 904, Freedom Trap. Indians yearn for freedom and independence. However, the British colonial authorities tried their best to restrict their freedom and prevent them from becoming independent. If the Indians became independent and had freedom, how could the British colonial authorities enslave them? How to get wealth from India? There is a natural contradiction between the two. As long as the British colonial authorities did not have their heads caught by the door, they would not allow Indians to have freedom. After all, this will seriously damage their interests in India. However, as the external environment changes, contradictions can also change. No, the enemy is currently, in order to resist the German invasion, the British colonial authorities and the Indian elites are racking their brains to find a way. Charles Harding, as the governor of India, is obviously superior in political wisdom to others. After thinking hard, he finally thought of a way to prevent the Germans from invading India. In other words, a way to keep fighting with the Germans in India. Baron Charles Harding originally wanted to escape from India and go to Canada to live a life of peace of mind. However, he could only continue to serve as the governor of India when the British cabinet refused to agree to his resignation. If you fled back to Canada privately, it would be dereliction of duty. At that time, not only the noble title of baron will be lost, even it will be tried by the court and stay in India once the Germans call. If the British troops stationed in India and the British and Indian troops can't resist it, then the consequences are also very tragic. Maybe he will be arrested by the Germans and his life safety will not be guaranteed. Therefore, for the sake of his own life, Baron Charles Harding could only do his best. If he can really resist the German invasion in India, or even turn India into a war quagmire and defeat the Germans, then his reputation will be greatly improved. Returning to the UK in the future will have a high prestige. Not only can the title of nobility be promoted, but it is even possible to obtain a larger position. The position of Minister of Indian Affairs is too low to be considered. The Foreign Secretary may be fine. Even being Prime Minister is not out of the question, with luck. Thinking of these, Baron Charles Harding's heart became hot and full of energy. Your Excellency, how many military forces do we have in India now? Baron Charles Harding asked. Your Excellency, now our army is mainly divided into the British Army in India and the British and Indian Army. Among them, the British Army in India has 4 troops with 200,000 troops. The British and Indian Army has 6 troops with 1.2 million people. 1.5 million people, replied Lord William Nicholson. An army of 1.4 million people is undoubtedly a lot. However, considering that the combat effectiveness of the British Army is not as good as that of the German Army, let alone those British troops stationed in India. If there is a real fight, the combat effectiveness of these British troops stationed in India may be very limited. If it is not done well, not only will it not be of much help, but it may even be counterproductive. It is undoubtedly necessary to resist the German attack and increase their military strength in India as much as possible. If you don't have enough troops, What are you going to use to fight the Germans? At that time, the Germans will easily capture India. 1.4 million people is not enough. We need more troops. Only with more troops can we defeat the Germans. Baron Charles Harding said, Your Excellency Governor, we are already recruiting soldiers. However, Indians are lazy, and not many people are willing to serve as soldiers. Especially the Congress Party and other parties are still making trouble for us, lobbying those who want to join the army to give up joining the army. It makes it even more difficult for us to recruit enough soldiers. The government has transported us a large amount of weapons and equipment from the United States and Canada. In addition, our arsenal in India is also constantly producing weapons and equipment. But the problem is that there are not enough soldiers, no matter how many weapons and equipment there are, but there are not enough people to use them. There is nothing we can do. Lord William Nicholson looked embarrassed. Under the colonial rule of the British, India's industry has also developed to a certain extent. It even completely surpassed the Eastern powers of the same period. There are also arsenals capable of producing rifles, machine guns and small caliber artillery. Of course, heavy artillery is not capable of production. The British are also worried that India has the ability to produce heavy artillery. Even the production lines of rifles and machine guns were secretly shipped to India because the war was extremely unfavorable to Britain. The purpose is to use India as a base for the re-emergence of the British Empire. Why? Why do those guys prevent Indians from serving as soldiers? Baron Charles Harding frowned tightly. You know, India has a population of more than 300 million. If the restrictions are relaxed, and the conscription is frantic, not to mention arming 30 million troops, but there is absolutely no problem in recruiting 10 million troops. Of course, the British and Indian colonial authorities did not have enough weapons to arm such a large army, not even a single rifle. However, even if they can arm several million more troops, this will greatly enhance their strength. Although the combat effectiveness of these Indian troops is worrying, most unskilled elephants, maybe it can still play a certain role. Your Excellency, those guys are very pessimistic about the upcoming war situation, thinking that we can't resist the German attack. If the Indians join the army, they will definitely suffer heavy casualties. Therefore, they thought that to prevent those Indians from joining the army, it will reduce Indian casualties, said Lord William Nicholson. A murderous intent flashed in Baron Charles Harding's eyes. He has never been interested in those people. If he hadn't worried that taking tough measures against them would cause a large number of Indians to oppose Britain, he would have attacked them long ago. But now, they dared to take the bottom of the colonial authorities, which undoubtedly made Baron Charles Harding move to kill. Your Excellency, now that the Germans are about to attack India, we should not take action against those people. William Nicholson persuaded. If it arouses public indignation, it is really an internal and external trouble. At that time, it is even more impossible for them to hold on to India. Baron Charles Harding nodded. I know. Don't they want freedom? Then, let's give them freedom. Call those guys the freedom they have been longing for. I agree. However, from the sneer on his face, it can be seen that he has bad intentions. Chapter 905, Crazy Plan. Your Excellency, do you want to wipe out those people? In that case, there will definitely be a big mess in India. At that time, I'm afraid there will be a big uprising that will sweep across India just like the mid-19th century. William Lord Wilson panicked. Baron Charles Harding gave Lord William Nicholson a blank look. No wonder this guy can only be mixed in the military. If such an IQ mixed in the political world, he might have been eaten up by others. Your Excellency, how could I attack them at this time? Although, I have always wanted to eradicate them. However, I know that now is not the right time. Baron Charles Harding said. Hearing what Baron Charles Harding said, Lord William Nicholson breathed a sigh of relief. If he really faces internal and external troubles, his army can only be exhausted. Even the rule of the British and Indian colonial authorities in India may be overthrown. Didn't they always want freedom, self-government, and even independence? Well, this time, let's do what they want, said Baron Charles Harding. However, Your Excellency Governor, if we agree to their independence, the cabinet may not be able to explain it. Lord William Nicholson was a little worried. Don't you worry, how could I do that? It's just that, if we want the Indians to contribute, of course we have to give them a little thought. If this is the case, they will wholeheartedly work for us. Baron Charles Harding sneered said. Lord William Nicholson, some understand the intention of Baron Charles Harding. This time, I will tell the leaders of the major parties in India that after the war with the Germans is over, we will allow them to achieve self-government. Even after the next 10 years, we will allow them to gain independence. Then, now that we have made concessions, we have given them hope. But if they want to truly gain independence, the first thing they need to do is to resist the German invasion this time. Only by resisting the German invasion, then everything is possible. Otherwise, our promise will become empty words. I think, in order to be independent, these Indians will definitely cooperate with us. At that time, we will easily obtain enough soldiers, Your Excellency. Soon you will be troubled by your own huge army. At that time, we will easily obtain enough soldiers, Your Excellency. Soon you will be troubled by your own huge army. Time, you will find that commanding so many troops will be a trouble. Baron Charles Harding said. Your Excellency, this strategy is really great. Those Indians have longed for independence for a very long time. Once we give them this hope, they will definitely agree. Lord William Nicholson said. He also knows the thoughts of these Indians very well. In order to be independent, they can do anything. Your Excellency, with the weapons and equipment we have now, to what scale can the British and Indian army be expanded? Asked Baron Charles Harding. In his opinion, the problem of soldiers can be solved very easily. Your Excellency, the government shipped a large amount of weapons and equipment before, plus weapons and equipment produced by Indian arsenals. If we don't consider the lack of heavy weapons, we can expand the size of the British and Indian troops from 1.2 million to 3 million people. If we can get another batch of equipment, we can even further expand the scale. Lord William Nicholson said. 3 million people, including the British troops stationed in India. There are only 3.2 million people. Such a force is still too small. Baron Charles Harding frowned. Apparently he thinks more troops are needed if India is to be turned into a war quagmire. I will send a telegram to the cabinet, trying to get them to send us more weapons and equipment as much as possible before the Germans attack India. In addition, the arsenal will also work overtime for production. From now on, carry out 3 shifts. Those lazy engines, use the whip to deal with them. In this way, we can produce more weapons and equipment. Do everything possible to arm the British and Indian troops to 5 million people. If it doesn't go well, then increase the scale to 10 million people. If there are not enough weapons and equipment, it's very simple. The big deal is that 2 Indians share a rifle and the other one fires a grenade. You can wait until after his comrades were killed, he picked up his rifle and continued to fight, said Lord Charles Harding with a dark face. Obviously, in order to arm more troops, he will do everything possible. It can be seen from this that he doesn't care about the lives of Indians at all. Anyway, India has a population of more than 300 million, and it is nothing at all if a few million or even tens of millions die. If the Germans can be defeated by consuming so many Indians, it will undoubtedly be very cost effective. Lord William Nicholson was stunned. He seemed completely unaware that Baron Charles Harding would be so crazy. However, if they really have so many troops, maybe they can really defeat the Germans. Your Excellency, if we can arm tens of millions of troops, maybe we can really resist the German invasion. After all, it is impossible for the Germans to send too many troops to India. At most hundreds of thousands of people. It is entirely possible to defeat them with a strength advantage of more than 10 times or even more than 20 times. By then, we will be able to keep India. Lord William Nicholson said excitedly. Charles. Baron Harding also laughed. He was satisfied that he could think of such a plan. It is undoubtedly very cost effective to use the lives of humble Indians to pay for the rise of the British Empire. The lives of British people are precious. If too many people die, it will not be easy to explain to the country. However, if the dead are Indians, there is no concern. Besides, if all those annoying guys die in this war, it will be very helpful for Britain to continue its colonial rule of India. Your Excellency, Governor, I have to plan carefully. How can I manage these millions or even tens of millions of troops? Reasonable arrangements must be made to bring out their combat effectiveness. Otherwise, even the upper without the battlefield, those mobs won't be of much use. Lord William Nicholson said. Baron Charles Harding nodded. After all, he is a layman in military affairs and can only be handed over to Lord William Nicholson. Chapter 906, Deception. Your Excellency, according to this point of view, the possibility of us resisting the German invasion is undoubtedly very high. However, after we win, do we really want to give independence to those Indian natives? William Nicholson asked the Lord. As the commander of the British Army in India and the British Indian Army, he also knows the situation in India very well, and knows how rich it is here. For the British Empire, India has undoubtedly become an indispensable and most important colony. It can be said that, if India can continue to be in the hands of the British Empire, this will greatly promote the re-emergence of the British Empire. So, Lord William Nicholson also does not really want to lose India. If India is lost, even if the British Empire rises again, it can only be a second-rate power, and it will never return to its peak state. Of course it is impossible. If we really defeat Germany, then it will be the fourth period of those guys. At that time, I will kill them all. Baron Charles Harding said. This is a plan he had thought up a long time ago, and everything was just to deceive those Indian natives, to contribute their strength to resist the German invasion. When the German attack is really resisted, then those Indian natives will become unimportant. This is a reason why the so-called birds are exhausted. But if that happens, won't it cause even greater chaos in India? At that time, our rule will also be overthrown by the Indians. Lord William Nicholson frowned. He thought that, if he deceived the Indians like that, he might be in great trouble. After all, after this war, even if the losses are heavy, the military strength of the Indians will still be greatly improved. So, Your Excellency, you have to think carefully about how to consume the most radical and most opposed people in the war. Use the hands of the Germans to eliminate those radicals. In this case, even if when chaos breaks out in India, it will be easily suppressed. At that time, India will still be our colony. After all, a large part of Indians have been tamed by us. They have accepted our rule willingly. As long as they are hungry, if they don't die, they won't resist. It's only a small group of people who really resist us. We can get rid of them and defeat the Germans at the same time. Then, we can sit back and relax. Baron Charles Harding, it looks like everything is under his control. Your Excellency, if this plan can really be realized, then we will be the biggest winners, said Lord William Nicholson. Although this plan is very risky, the possibility of success is also very high. The most important thing is that once successful, the benefits will be amazing. So, no one can deny this, Your Excellency. We will succeed. I think God will bless us. The British Empire will be revived in our hands. We will all be the heroes of the British Empire. Our names will be remembered forever in the annals. Baron Charles Harding was very excited. This time, Baron Charles Harding planned a scam carefully, a scam that wiped out all the elites in India. Use their desire for freedom and independence as bait, to make them work hard for the British Empire. At the same time, they use the hands of the Germans to remove these people. Wait until the end, after defeating the Germans, and then take action, to wipe out all the remaining elites. In the end, it is they who benefit. Their rule in India will thus be truly stabilized. It will be impossible for India to get rid of their colonial rule. Next, Baron Charles Harding issued an order to invite the leaders of the Congress Party and the Green Party alliance to the Governor's Palace to discuss the future of India. After receiving the invitation from Baron Charles Harding, Tilak, Gandhi, Nehru and Jinnah readily went. Although they all hated the British colonial rule of India, they all had to admit that the current British and Indian colonial authorities were not something they could resist. In addition, the credibility of the colonial authorities is also trustworthy, so there is no need to worry that they will take this opportunity to attack them. It's just that they didn't know that Baron Charles Harding had already dug the trap, and he just waited for them to jump into it foolishly. Once they jump in, they really can't turn over again. Charles Harding only invited the Congress Party and the Green Party alliance because they are the only two largest parties in India. For the rest of the small parties, there is no need to invite them at all. As long as the two parties are persuaded, all problems will be solved. On January 31st, 1916, the leaders of the Congress Party and the Green Party alliance walked into the Governor's Palace of India. In order to show their importance, Baron Charles Hardinge even greeted them on the steps of the gate. There is no doubt that this is already a great courtesy to these people. Nehru, who was only in his 20s, was even very excited. In his view, Baron Charles Hardinge's behavior was a recognition of them. This means that they have become important people in India. Welcome to the governor's mansion. I'm very happy that you are here. Baron Charles Hardinge smiled. Your Excellency, excuse me. The group did not stop at the gate of the governor's mansion, but entered inside under the guidance of Baron Charles Hardinge. After some pleasantries, their conversation got to the point. Everyone, the British Empire has suffered an unprecedented defeat. Even our homeland has been occupied by the Germans. However, we believe that the difficulties are only temporary. The British Empire has not given up its efforts so far. We firmly believe that we will be victorious in the future, said Baron Charles Hardinge. However, Tilak and the others were non-committal about Baron Charles Hardinge's statement. The Germans are so powerful now, they don't believe that the British still have a chance to come back. Of course, everyone did not refute Baron Charles Hardinge. Otherwise, everyone will lose face. India is also in danger. The Germans are preparing to attack India. Once the Germans attack India, the whole of India will be killed and suffer heavy losses. I think no one wants to see India change be like this, said Lord Charles Hardinge. Chapter 907, The Price of Independence. Baron Charles Hardinge's words made everyone's expressions change drastically. As the leaders of India's largest party, no matter what purpose or selfish desire they have, they still hope to see India getting better and better. Germany's imminent invasion of India is something they don't want to see. The authorities are preparing to arm more troops to defend India. We hope that more Indians can join them. The Congress Party and the Green Party alliance are the largest parties in India. I hope you can exert influence. Let the people join the army, instead of letting them resist us and oppose us. If we are defeated by the Germans, it will be of no benefit to everyone. Baron Charles Hardinge earnestly persuaded. Your Excellency, we do not want a war to break out. Once Rang and the German army go to war, our people will suffer heavy casualties. Gandhi said, frowning. Mr. Gandhi, we also don't want a war. But there is no way the Germans will not agree. This war is not what we want to start. There is only one possibility to keep India, and that is to hold off the Germans' attack, said Baron Charles Hardinge. However, the Germans are too powerful. It is impossible for us to defeat them. Jinnah shook his head. The Green Party is the second largest party after the Congress Party. Jinnah's attitude is also very important. It's just that Jinnah obviously doesn't think they have the strength to confront the world's most powerful country. Everyone, I know that you all know that Germany is very powerful. I don't deny this. Even Germany is stronger than the British Empire. Otherwise, the British Empire would not have been defeated by them. However, if we dare not confront them, because Germany is strong, then we may have no choice but to surrender to them. In this regard, these Indian elites have no other performance. For them, India is now under British colonial rule. If the Germans come in, they will just change their masters, and it is no big deal. It would definitely be a good thing if the Germans could be kinder to them. Baron Charles Hardinge looked at the expressions of these guys, and of course he understood what they were thinking. He knew that if he didn't make a ruthless move, there would be nothing he could do. Everyone, the British Empire has always been aware of your political demands, and has considered this issue. It has not agreed before, because the vast majority of Indian people are still relatively ignorant. That's why the authorities rejected you. However, when India is at a critical juncture, the authorities can assure you, as long as the German attack can be resisted in this battle, then, the authorities will gradually agree to Indian autonomy. Baron Charles Hardinge said. Suddenly, the expressions on the faces of Tilak and the others changed. Charles Hardinge's proposal moved them very much. Haven't they been fighting for the right to self-government all along? As long as self-government can be achieved, it will soon be able to go a step further and achieve true independence. Your Excellency, is what you said true? Tilak asked. Of course, I guarantee this is true. If you don't believe me, I can sign the relevant documents with you. Baron Charles Hardinge said. These stupid guys, I knew this would definitely tempt them. These guys are indeed a group of ungrateful people. They all forgot that the British Empire brought them from ignorance to civilized society. Now, but you want to get rid of the control of the British Empire with all your heart, and you deserve death. Wait until you resist the Germans, and then deal with you. Baron Charles Harding thought secretly in his heart. He seems to have forgotten that, if it were not for the slavery of the British Empire, these Indians would not be living in such poverty. You know, the wealth that the British Empire plundered from India every year is an astronomical figure. Your Excellency Governor, what is the specific period for the gradual self-government you mentioned? Nehru asked. He didn't want the British to regret it. After resisting the German attack. 3 years. After resisting the German attack, within 3 years, the authorities will gradually allow India to self-govern. Baron Charles Harding promised. Anyway, these are just empty promises, as long as these Indian natives are deceived. 3 years is not a long time. These Indian elites are quite satisfied with this. Your Excellency, even if we assist the authorities with all our strength, it will be very difficult to defeat the Germans. Gandhi said. When everyone else fell into ecstasy because of the words of Baron Charles Harding, Gandhi was not like else. He knew very well the style of the British and Indian colonial authorities. If he was not forced to do so, he would never regress. Now, the British and Indian colonial authorities have let go on the issue of self-government. Then, there is undoubtedly only one possibility, and that is that the Germans are very difficult to deal with. If they fail, they will pay an extremely heavy price in this war. At that time, I don't know how many Indians died in the war. Yes, the Germans are very powerful. We must be prepared for heavy casualties. However, there is no free lunch in the world. If India wants to gain autonomy, it must contribute its own strength. Otherwise, with so many colonies in the British Empire, why should India be self-governed? Said Baron Charles Harding. Suddenly, Tilak, Gandhi and others were silent. They are wondering whether it is worth sacrificing the lives of countless Indians for India's independence. Everyone, although Germany is very powerful, it is impossible for them to devote all their strength to India. The German army we need to deal with is at most a few 100,000. Although the German army is very powerful, it is definitely not invincible. If we can arm 5 million troops, and we will definitely be able to resist the Germans' attack. Even defeating them is not difficult. Baron Charles Harding persuaded. 5 million troops? So many? Tilak, Gandhi and others all exclaimed. India has a population of more than 300 million. Arming 5 million troops is nothing at all. If it is further mobilized, arming tens of millions of troops is nothing. Baron Charles Harding said nonchalantly. Today's India is a popular country second only to the big eastern countries, and its superiority in soldiers is enough to make other countries daunting. Chapter 908, The Emperor's Confidence. Berlin, Germany, General Staff. Emperor Qin Tian, Minister of War and Chief of the General Staff Marshal von Falkenhayn, Minister of the Navy Marshal Reinhardtscheer, and Director of the Intelligence Bureau, General Bolaming, all gathered here. Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, Marshals, according to the information we have received, India is now expanding its army crazily. Under the mobilization of the Congress Party and the Green Party alliance, countless Indian youths enthusiastically signed up to join the army. In a very short period of time, the British Indian Army, I'm afraid it will grow explosively. Admiral Bolaming said with some worry. How did this happen? How did the Congress Party and the Green Party alliance get involved with the British and Indian colonial authorities? Qin Tian frowned. Although India is only a colony, it has a population of more than 300 million. If Germany had a population of more than 300 million in the last World War, Qin Tian would have the confidence to unify the whole of Europe. With a population of more than 300 million, tens of millions or even more troops can easily be mobilized. It is a pity that Germany has only a population of more than 50 million. Without affecting the future of the country, it has reached its limit to mobilize 3 to 4 million troops. Fortunately, the most popular countries in this era are not developed. Otherwise, it would be impossible for Western countries to dominate the world. Marshal von Falkenhayn also had an ugly face. According to the plan, the German army would only dispatch 2 armies to attack India. The two group armies, after reorganization, are only 400,000 people. Compared with the troops that India can mobilize, the 400,000 people are undoubtedly not even a fraction of them. Of course, the combat effectiveness of the German army is naturally not comparable to those of the Indians. How big might the British Indian army be expanded? Marshal Rian had Shear asked. Judging from the current situation, according to incomplete statistics, the size of the British and Indian troops may expand to more than 5 million. Of course, considering India's huge population, if they further expand their troops, there will be no problem at all. Admiral Bolaming continued. That is to say, as long as the British are willing, the strength of the British and Indian troops will be further expanded. Even if it expands to tens of millions, there will be no problem. Qin Tian said. Yes, Your Majesty. Theoretically speaking, there is no problem in expanding the British and Indian troops to 10 million. Admiral Bolaming said. However, even if the Indian colonial authorities expand to such a large number of troops, they do not have enough weapons and equipment to arm that many troops. According to our estimates, their existing weapons and equipment can only arm 3 million people at most. Of course, every day, a large number of merchant ships from North America dock in India, and these merchant ships probably transport weapons and equipment. Therefore, the number of British and Indian troops is also growing rapidly. No, the British can no longer transport those weapons and equipment to India. In that case, we will pay a higher price for taking India. Marshal Shear, the Indian Ocean Fleet, and the Pacific Fleet set off. Let them blockade India as soon as possible. From now on, one piece of weaponry cannot be allowed to flow into India. Qin Tian said. Yes, Your Majesty. Marshal Rian had Shear nodded. The Indian Ocean Fleet and the Pacific Fleet are all ready to go. It's just that the home port of the fleet has not yet been settled, so they didn't set off. Now that the situation is urgent, I can't care so much. At most, send some more supply ships. Wait until the army has conquered India, and then slowly determine the home port of the fleet. Your Majesty, even if we blockade India, I'm afraid that we will not be able to prevent the British and Indian troops from obtaining weapons and equipment. According to the information we have received, the British have expanded the scale of India's arsenal as early as a year ago. Now, India's arsenal, it can produce hundreds of thousands of rifles. It can even produce machine guns and light artillery. It's just that the quantity is not large. Admiral Bolaming said. The British had expected that they would lose a long time ago, so they made preparations in advance. But even if that is the case, after the blockade of India, at least they will not be able to get supplementary heavy weapons. As long as we quickly, if the battle is decided quickly, they can be defeated before they arm more troops. Qin Tian said. Yes, Your Majesty. Several people replied. Your Majesty, do we need to increase our troops? Marshal von Falkenhayn asked. No need for now. The British armed those Indians in a hurry. It's just that they have an advantage in strength. In fact, how much combat power can those troops that have just been armed? I doubt it very much. As long as we quickly in the battle against India, those troops who have not even completed their training are nothing more than cannon fodder after being put into the battle. Our elite troops can easily defeat them. On the battlefield, once the troops are defeated, those recruits become the consequences for a defeated army are very serious. Qin Tian said with a smile. Marshal von Falkenhayn nodded, although the size of the British and Indian troops was very scary. However, in terms of combat effectiveness, it is naturally very rubbish. If the two elite German armies performed well, defeating them was not impossible. However, I'm curious, how did the Congress Party and the Green Party alliance cooperate with the British and Indian colonial authorities at this juncture? Didn't they always oppose the British and Indian colonial authorities? Qin Tian asked. Yes, Your Majesty. In order to fight for India's independence, the National Congress Party and the Green Party alliance have serious conflicts with the British and Indian colonial authorities. This time they will cooperate, which is also beyond our expectations. Our intelligence personnel replies that the British promised that, as long as our attack is resisted in India, they will be allowed to give the Indians full self-government, and even let India become independent after a few years. Admiral Blemen reported. What? Just because of this, they will fully cooperate with the British? Qin Tian was completely speechless. Those Indian asterisk are too easy to deceive. Even Qin Tian, an outsider, could see that all this was just a British scam. But they still foolishly believed it. This made Qin Tian feel a little regretful. If he had known that they could have deceived those Indians in this regard, in this case, it will be much easier for them to win India. However, it is too late to say anything now. Well, since the native Indians have already supported the British, we have no other choice but to conquer them by force. I believe that the mighty German Empire will definitely be able to conquer India. Qin Tian was confident. Said perfectly. Chapter 909, Block India. On February 9, 1916, the German Foreign Office held a press conference. German Foreign Minister Wachter announced to reporters that starting today, India will become a war zone. The coast of India will become a no-go zone. A week later, the German Navy will blockade the coast of India, and ships from any country are not allowed to enter the coast of India. Otherwise, it will be regarded as supporting the enemy of the German Empire. Those ships, once discovered, were all sunk. There is no doubt that the German Foreign Minister Wachter's statement is undoubtedly very tough. In terms of size, India is definitely a big country with a very long coastline. The German Navy dispatched a large number of warships to blockade the coast of India. This approach is undoubtedly very strong. Of course, Germany has done it once in the UK before to delineate the no-fly zone. Although Germany had the upper hand in the war at that time, it did not win the war. Therefore, many countries are dissatisfied with Germany's approach. The United States, in particular, have dispatched a powerful fleet to break through Germany's no-fly zone. As a result, it was intercepted by the German Navy. After some open and secret fighting, the Americans were still defeated. From this we can see how strong Germany is. This time, Germany once again designated a no-fly zone. Although, the area of the no-fly zone is larger. But with Germany's current strong status as the world's hegemon, there really is no country that dares to defy. With the behavior of the Germans, if they really dare to defy, the Germans will definitely sink their ships. However, even so, journalists from many countries have expressed doubts about Germany's approach, thinking that Germany's doing so is really rude. But Wachter ignored it at all, and only claimed that India was already a colony of the empire. It is completely legal and reasonable for the empire to send troops to recover the colony of India. Any attempt to obstruct Germany's recovery of India will become Germany's enemy. Germany will not let go of the colony of India. This is well known. After all, India's wealth makes all countries drool. In other words, those natives in India are too easy to manage. They who have been tamed by the British are undoubtedly the best candidates for enslavement in the world. If it were any powerful country, I'm afraid that such a colony would not be spared. Germany began to blockade India, which also indicates that Germany will soon attack India. In this regard, the world's major powers are very concerned. There is anger, there is envy, and more is the hope that Germany will suffer in India. It would certainly be better if the British could turn India into a war quagmire and trap the Germans in it. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill instructed the Governor of India, Baron Charles Hardinge, to ask him to find a way to hold the Germans in India no matter what. It would be even better if the Germans could suffer heavy losses in India and even drag down Germany. Even Churchill made a promise to Baron Charles Hardinge. If Germany can be defeated in India, Baron Charles Hardinge will be the next Chancellor of the Exchequer. You know, according to the usual practice, as long as the party he belongs to wins the next general election, the Chancellor of the Exchequer is often the definite candidate for Prime Minister. Churchill's promise made Charles Baron Hardinge ecstatic. This made he worked harder to develop India's military power and was ready to fight the Germans in India. After all, these Indian natives were used to fight the Germans anyway, and no matter how many people died, it had nothing to do with the British Empire. If Germany can be defeated, even if the whole of India is sent to death, Baron Charles Hardinge will not frown. At the same time, the United States and the United Kingdom are also seizing the last time to send as many weapons and equipment as possible to India. They all knew that once the German blockade started, it would be impossible for them to send weapons and equipment to India. The more weapons and equipment shipped to India, the more Indian troops can be armed. Even if those armies will not have much combat effectiveness, they will always play a certain role. Even if 10 Indians were killed for the life of 1 German, it would undoubtedly be very cost effective. Crown Prince Carol of the Austro-Hungarian Empire is in the Imperial Palace in Vienna, waiting for the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph I to take his last breath, so that he can justifiably assume the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. For this day, he has waited a lot of time. However, although the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph I looked like he was about to smoke, he kept dragging it down, which made Crown Prince Carol very angry. Regarding Germany's upcoming attack on India, Crown Prince Carol also hoped that Germany would make a big fall in India, because he knew that if there were no accidents in Germany, it would be almost impossible for the Austro-Hungarian Empire he led to surpass Germany. Now, only if Germany has its own problems, they have a chance. A huge fleet is sailing on the Arabian Sea. This is the combined fleet of the German Navy's Pacific Fleet and Indian Ocean Fleet. There are a total of 8 battleships and 6 battle cruisers, plus light cruisers and destroyers. There are nearly 100 battleships. Pacific Fleet Commander Admiral Spee, as the commander of the combined fleet. This term will last until the war in India comes to an end. After Germany defeats India, the Indian Ocean Fleet will choose one of the coastal ports in India as its home port and begin its patrol mission in the Indian Ocean. The Pacific Fleet, on the other hand, will continue to move eastward and cooperate with the army to take down the British colonies in Southeast Asia and Australia, so that the Empire can fully receive the British colonies this time. The flagship of the Pacific Fleet, the battleship King, became the flagship of the United Fleet. The commander of the Pacific Fleet, Admiral Spee, and Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Norman, and the commander of the Indian Ocean Fleet, Lieutenant Admiral Ingenol, and Chief of Staff Rear Admiral Ruiter, all gathered on the front deck of the battleship. Gentlemen, there are still 2 days before we arrive in India. However, India's coastline is too long, and it is very difficult to completely block it. I propose that we divide India's coastline into 2 parts. The Indian Ocean Fleet is in charge, and the Pacific Fleet in the east is in charge. In this case, the division of labor and cooperation may be more efficient. Admiral Spee suggested. Okay, General Spee. Lieutenant General Ingenol nodded. The army will soon start to attack India. In addition to performing blockade tasks, we will also have to perform fire support tasks for the army when they land. In any case, for the Empire, India is too important. This time, we must do our best to beat it down. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 910, The Germans Are Coming. On the morning of February 16th, the warships of the German Navy's Indian Ocean Fleet appeared in the waters of Western India on time. Dozens of warships spread out and headed for the long coastline. Although the Indian Ocean Fleet has more than 40 warships, large and small, it is nothing compared to the more than 2,000 kilometers of coastline in Western India. Calculated, each warship needs to be responsible for the blockade of a coastline as long as 50 kilometers. During the day, with the speed of these warships, there may not be much problem. However, due to the influence of sight at night, it may be difficult to block it. This made the German Navy's blockade of India less strict. Those merchant ships from the United Kingdom and the United States can still find loopholes and transport those weapons and equipment to India. However, in this calculation, it is much better than not blocking it and allowing Britain and the United States to transport those weapons and equipment to India. The intelligence agency estimates that after the naval blockade is completed, the amount of weapons and equipment shipped to India by the United Kingdom and the United States will be reduced by more than 70%. This is already a very good result. Without those weapons and equipment, there will be major problems in the armed forces of the British and Indian troops. The difficulty for the German army to win India will be effectively reduced. As soon as the German Navy appeared, the British and Indian colonial authorities knew about it. Lord Charles Harding immediately summoned Lord William Nicholson. The Germans are coming. Although, it is only the German Navy that is here now. However, it is foreseeable that the German army will also come soon. The time left for us is running out. Your Excellency, you need to come here in the shortest possible time. Within a short period of time, we must try our best to make those Indian aborigines capable of combat. I'm afraid it is not enough just to learn how to shoot, Baron Charles Harding said. The day of the German attack has arrived, which makes Baron Charles Harding even more worried, although he thought he had took all possible problems into account. However, he still has some concerns about whether the plan will be successful this time. If the plan fails to meet expectations, the consequences will be very serious. Your Excellency, we have sent troops to conduct special training. Even in order to allow the troops to have enough instructors, I have ordered that all the previous 1.2 million British and Indian troops be dispersed, and the first batch together, the recruited soldiers formed 25 new group armies. However, this also reduced the combat effectiveness of the British and Indian troops. But so far, the soldiers of the newly formed group armies have at least learned how to shoot. Next, we will focus on training in other aspects. However, the Germans will not give us too much time to train these troops. I predict that once the war breaks out, the British and Indian troops will only be barely capable of combat, said Lord William Nicholson. During this period of time, in order to train these troops, he can be said to have broken his heart. Now, Lord William Nicholson has finally realized what it means to have too many troops, and it has become a kind of distress instead. William Nicholson never thought about the expansion of the British and Indian army to 5 million people, so that under the condition of insufficient preparation, the British and Indian troops lacked everything. Lack of armament, lack of uniform, lack of officers, and more than that, lack of time. If you have enough time, these can also be slowly made up. But unfortunately, what the British and Indian troops lack most now is time. After the emergence of the German Navy, it also means that the war is coming. Baron Charles Harding nodded. I also know that it is almost impossible to train those Indian natives into elite troops. Anyway, our advantage in this battle is not the combat effectiveness of the troops at all. It is superiority in military strength. This is an advantage that the Germans cannot compare with us. I believe that, as long as we can make full use of this advantage, we will definitely make the Germans pay a very heavy price. Even defeating them is not impossible. Yes, Your Excellency the Governor. Lord William Nicholson nodded. However, Your Excellency Governor, I think we can prepare for the next batch of British and Indian soldiers. When the current British and Indian troops are used to resist the German attack, we must first recruit the next batch of soldiers. Conduct training. In this way, after the previous batch of troops have suffered heavy losses, the next batch of troops has almost formed combat effectiveness and can be used directly. Lord William Nicholson continued. Okay, I will communicate with the Congress Party and the Green Party Alliance and let them prepare the next batch of soldiers. With this tens of millions of troops, even if we cannot defeat the Germans, we should be able to bring the battle to a stalemate. By then, even if it is exhausted, with India's population resources, the Germans can't compete with us, said Baron Charles Harding. After reaching an agreement with the Congress Party and the Green Party Alliance, there is no problem with the conscription of the British and Indian Army. Those members of the Congress Party and the Green Party Alliance alone are enough to meet the needs of the British Indian Army. Not to mention that there are still a large number of farmers who, after being affected, voluntarily joined the army. Yes, Your Excellency the Governor. Lord William Nicholson replied. However, he was always worried, because their plans did not take into account the morale of the troops. If the morale of the British and Indian troops is low due to successive failures, he can't guarantee how much combat power those troops will have at that time. Of course, Lord William Nicholson said, it is useless to say these things now, and Baron Charles Harding simply cannot listen. The current Baron Charles Harding has pinned all his hopes on it. Lord William Nicholson can only pray to God, praying that the battle will become a little smoother for them. The 8th Army of the German Army boarded the transport ship to India, after cooperating with the Kingdom of Nazi to destroy the Kingdom of Weiqi, and after a short rest. After the Navy arrives, they will launch an attack on India. The 8th Army will serve as the vanguard of the attack on India. The 4th Army will arrive in the next step. From the current point of view, the two armies are the entire force of Germany's offensive against India. Of course, if the battle situation is really not going well, Germany will definitely deploy more troops to attack India. After all, India played an irreplaceable and important role in the German colonial system. And Germany also has enough troops for additional troops. Chapter 911, Landing Point. On February 19th, a huge transport fleet transporting 200,000 people from the 8th Army of the German Army arrived in the waters of Western India. The German 8th Army has no troops stationed in Egypt or the Middle East. Their task is to defeat the enemy, and the occupation and control of these colonies will be arranged domestically. At that time, the General Staff will send special troops to station, and at the same time, reorganize the troops of the German Protectorate, so that the combat effectiveness of these troops can be increased to a level sufficient to ensure the safety of these protectorates. That afternoon, Admiral Ludendorff, commander of the 8th Army, boarded the battleship Nassau, the flagship of the Indian Ocean Fleet. Next, the 8th Army needs to cooperate with the Indian Ocean Fleet. General, welcome. Lieutenant General Ingenieur and Major General Reuter saluted General Ludendorff, although they belong to different systems. However, Ludendorff is an admiral after all, with a higher rank than them. Admiral Ludendorff returned a salute. Your Excellency, Commander, Your Excellency the Chief of Staff. Next, the 8th Army has many places that need to trouble you. Admiral Ludendorff said. It is impossible for him to use his rank to coerce the Indian Ocean Fleet into doing anything. After all, it is not a system. If the other party ignores him, there is nothing he can do. General, it is our responsibility to fully cooperate with your operations. The Indian Ocean Fleet will definitely cooperate with the 8th Army, Lieutenant General Ingenieur said quickly. Afterwards, they went to the war room to communicate about the upcoming battle. General Ingenieur, I plan to launch a landing operation tomorrow. Can the fleet dispatch some capital ships to provide fire support for our landing? Admiral Ludendorff asked. General, the 8th Army has come a long way. Don't you need to take a break? Lieutenant General Ingenieur did not answer immediately, but asked with concern. After all, taking a boat is not a good thing, especially for long-distance voyages at sea. For the army who is used to land, many people will get seasick. It's not necessary. If you want to rest, wait until you get ashore. Every day we delay, the British can arm tens of thousands of Indians. That is a real disaster for us. Ludendorff said with a serious face. According to the information they got, the British are crazily arming the Indians. It is said that the British Indian Army has grown to 5 million people, and the British conscription has not yet ended, and is still going on. This is not good news for the German Army. After all, the German Army has too few troops to fight in India. Compared with India's huge land area, 400,000 people are nothing at all. If the time drags on longer, it will be more unfavorable to the German Army. In that case, the British would have enough time to arm more British and Indian troops, and even train them to make them more effective. At that time, if the German Army wants to defeat these British and Indian troops, it may have to pay a higher price. In any case, the German Army must try its best to prevent this from happening. Lieutenant General Ingenieur nodded. That's true, General. In the past 2 days, we have sunk dozens of ships from other countries that tried to forcefully break through our blockade and entered India. The Pacific Fleet attacked. The sunk ships are only a lot more than ours. Obviously, the British have not stopped transporting weapons and equipment to India. The important task of preventing the British from transporting weapons and equipment to India is left to you, Admiral Ludendorff said. This is a duty. Don't worry about fire support, General. Several other capital ships will arrive tonight. Tomorrow morning, we will gather 7 capital ships to provide fire support for the Army's landing, Lieutenant General Ingenieur said. The Mediterranean Fleet has only 7 capital ships in total, and they can all be assembled to provide fire support for the landing of the 8th Army. This is undoubtedly supporting them with all their strength. This made General Ludendorff very satisfied. By the way, General Ingenieur, we are newcomers. The Mediterranean Fleet has been wandering around the western coast of India for several days. Do you think it is better to choose where to land? Admiral Ludendorff asked. General, if you want to choose a landing point, Mumbai is naturally the best. Mumbai is the largest city in India and the most industrially developed city. It has a complete port. If Mumbai can be taken, the logistical supply for the troops will be great. Very beneficial. Lieutenant General Ingenol suggested. General Ludendorff nodded. The supply of more than 200,000 people from the 8th Army alone is a huge number. After the 4th Army arrived, the pressure on logistical supplies was even greater. If Mumbai, especially the port of Mumbai, can be taken intact, it will play a very important role in ensuring the German army's operations on the Indian subcontinent. However, if they attack Mumbai directly, the British will destroy Mumbai. At least, they will blow up the port of Mumbai. In that case, we will get nothing. Admiral Ludendorff worried about the British will choose to die together. Yes, General, it is indeed possible. But as long as we launch an attack on Bombay, the possibility of the British destroying the port of Bombay will definitely exist. It is very difficult for us to take the port of Bombay intact. But as long as it is a rare victory, to be able to keep the main body of the port. As long as you act quickly, it may not be impossible. Lieutenant General Ingenor suggested. Well, that is indeed the case. Then, choose this place as the landing point. Admiral Ludendorff's finger landed on the map. The place Admiral Ludendorff pointed to is called Alibag, a small coastal town about 20 kilometers away from Mumbai. This is indeed a very good landing point. According to the information we have obtained, there is a small port there, which can satisfy the landing of certain troops. The most important thing is that it is very close to Mumbai, and the landing troops can go directly to Mumbai. Launch an attack, Lieutenant General Ingenol said. How many British and Indian troops are there in Alibag? General Ludendorff asked. Thousands of people, almost the strength of an infantry brigade of the British Army. However, the combat effectiveness of troops composed of Indian natives will not be too strong. Lieutenant General Ingenor said. Well, then there should be no problem. Admiral Ludendorff is undoubtedly very confident about the next landing operation. Chapter 912. Battle started. On the morning of February 20th, the battleship Nassau and the battleship West ***, the flagships of the German Navy's Indian Ocean Fleet, appeared in the offshore of Alibag with several light cruisers and destroyers. Because the warships of the German Navy often patrolled this area, the soldiers of the British and Indian Army did not care about it after seeing it. The German warships are really huge. Those two warships are like hills. A soldier of the British and Indian Army was amazed. Yes. No wonder the Germans were able to defeat the British. Another soldier of the British Indian Army said. However, their boss, a British platoon leader, was very dissatisfied with this. He was originally an ordinary soldier living in the British and Indian Army. However, due to the crazy expansion of the British and Indian troops, there is a lack of grassroots officers. Therefore, Changan selected tens of thousands of people from the British and Indian troops to serve as platoon leaders or even company commanders of the British and Indian troops. Hearing that two Indian natives dared to say this, the face of the British platoon leader suddenly became ugly. Shut up, all of you. It was originally a warship of the British Empire. The despicable Germans stole those warships when they attacked the mainland of the empire. Now, they are still using these warships brazenly. It is simply too despicable. The grown-up cursed. The two soldiers of the British and Indian Army fell silent immediately, but everyone despised what the platoon leader said. In their hearts knew that the British mainland had fallen. Obviously, the warships currently used by the Germans are all German trophies. The Germans defeated the British and deserved the spoils. There is nothing mean or not mean about it. Blame them for losing the war. What are the German battleships doing here? Usually they pass through this sea area at most. The platoon leader felt a little organ. Sir, will the Germans just pass by here? They are going to Mumbai, perhaps. An Indian soldier said. After all, Mumbai is a big city, and if the German battleships want to attack, it is obvious that Mumbai is their goal. The platoon leader nodded, and he also felt very reasonable. However, the platoon leader's eyes widened soon, because he found that the two battleships actually slowed down and smashed the hull at the same time. Got. They are really going to attack Alibag. The platoon leader shouted. Boom. The battleship Nassau opened fire first, and three triple-mounted 380mm main guns smashed the heavy shells at Alibag. At the same time, the battleship West *** also began to attack. Two battleships began to ravage the small town with their main guns. A series of transport ships also appeared in the distance and began to approach the coastline. These transport ships carried the 3rd Division of the Marine Corps. Their task is to support the Army's landing operations on the Indian battlefield and at the same time take on the task of guarding the port to ensure the safety of the logistics supply base. Boom. The artillery shell exploded in the city of Alibag, and the low houses in the east were blown to pieces during the explosion. Countless Indians fled for their lives in all directions. Perhaps they never thought that the war would one day fall on their heads. Garrisoned here is the 2nd Infantry Brigade under the 12th Infantry Division of the 2nd Army of the British and Indian Army. The entire infantry brigade has only more than 4,000 people, and the brigade headquarters is located in the city. When the explosion sounded, the Brigadier General woke up suddenly. What's going on? What happened? Where did the explosion come from? The Brigadier General put on his pants and rushed out of the room. General, bombardment. The German battleship is firing on Alibag. The adjutant reported. What? The German battleship town is firing? Got. The Germans didn't choose Mumbai as a landing point. Why did they choose us here? The Brigadier General expressed his frightened expression. In addition, report to the division headquarters immediately that we have been bombarded by the Germans. The Germans may land in Alibag. We urgently need reinforcement. Otherwise, only God can prevent the fall of Alibag. Brigadier General Brigade Long ordered. He knew very well that, if the Germans really wanted to land in Alibag, his few thousand people alone would not even be able to stop the Germans. If it is a few thousand elite British soldiers, it may be possible to stop the Germans for a while, but it is impossible for a few thousand Indian soldiers. Yes, General. The communications soldier turned pale and went to send a telegram. Everyone is very clear that for them, the most dangerous time and space has arrived. Boom. Or 380mm artillery shell fell into the barracks of the British and Indian Army, and the dilapidated barracks were torn apart by the explosion. Countless British and Indian soldiers were killed in their sleep. Many British and Indian soldiers were awakened. They ran out of the barracks directly, and they didn't even have time to wear their pants, let alone their weapons and equipment. The British-Indian defense line on Alibag Beach was also the target of heavy bombardment by 2 battleships of the German Navy. Originally, though the defense line built by the British and Indian troops was not very strong, it was just a superficial product. The 380mm main gun of the battleship of the German Navy is even more powerful. Those fortifications built on the beach simply couldn't withstand the fierce German shelling and were easily destroyed. Boom. A shell exploded on the beach, and a huge shock wave engulfed the gravel in all directions. Although the sand on the beach affected the effect of the shelling to a certain extent, the fortifications around the explosion of the shells were all destroyed. On the beach, there are bomb craters left. Although the bombardment of the 2 capital ships of the German Navy lasted only 20 minutes, the beach in Alibag has become a mess. There are huge craters everywhere, just like the surface of the moon. Although there were not many attacks in the city of Alibag, the Indian natives living here have already been scared to death. Those Indian natives scattered and escaped before they had time to tidy up their belongings. The British and Indian troops stationed in Alibag, even the Germans have not seen it yet, but seeing the craters left by the main guns of those battleships, they were also scared out of their wits. However, soldiers are different from civilians after all. They have a certain degree of organization. Although the combat effectiveness of the British and Indian Army is relatively poor, in order to ensure that the Germans can be held back in the early stages of the war and to buy enough time for follow-up troops to train, the British and Indian Army's 1st Army, 2nd Army and 3rd Army did not. Even if it is split up, it can still be regarded as an elite force. Under the pressure of the officers, the soldiers of the 2nd Infantry Brigade of the 12th Infantry Division of the 2nd Army of the British and Indian Army hidden in the city tremblingly, preparing to resist the upcoming German attack. Chapter 913. Vulnerable. There are only a few thousand enemies on the coast, and they are weak Indian natives. Their combat effectiveness is extremely low. We only need to launch a wave of offensives to successfully land and defeat them. Remember, we must be as intact as possible, occupy the port here, and create conditions for the landing of the Army brothers. Major General Adam, the commander of the 3rd Division of the German Marine Corps, said to his regiment and battalion commanders. If we can't even beat those Indian natives, then we will become a laughingstock, not only the laughingstock of the Marine Corps, but also the laughingstock of the entire army and even the whole country. So, gentlemen, I need a clean and tidy fight victory. Let those Indian natives know what kind of enemy they are facing. Major General Adam continued. Don't worry, General. We will definitely defeat those Indian natives in this battle. We can defeat them very easily. I promise, said the regiment leader in charge of the first wave of attack. In that case, it couldn't be better. Major General Adam said. General, the fleet is notified that the landing operation can be carried out. A communications officer reported. 1st Regiment, go. Major General Adam ordered. Yes, General, replied the head of the 1st Regiment. A few minutes later, thousands of soldiers from the 1st Regiment of the 3rd Division of the Marine Corps rushed to the beach of Alibag in hundreds of landing craft. The Germans have launched a landing operation, and get into the position. We must not let the Germans wash up on the beach, or we will be finished. That's what they did in the UK back then. A British major and battalion commander shouted loudly Road. As a veteran who has experienced local combat, and was lucky enough to survive, fled to Canada, and was later sent to India, he knew the strength of the Germans. Those Indian soldiers who survived the shelling by chance, under the urging of the British officers, knew that they were punched and kicked, and crawled into the trenches. They looked at the sea in panic, and the landing craft that were rushing towards the beach looked like monsters. Bastard, what are you still doing in a daze? Shoot, a British officer yelled. Bang, bang. On the position of the British and Indian troops, there were sparse gunshots, and the bullets hit the sea, splashing one after another. However, it did not pose any threat to the German Marine Corps at all. Machine guns and mortars fire. Destroy the German landing craft, a British officer ordered. However, as soon as his order was issued, dense shells fell on their positions. Several German light cruisers and destroyers drove to the sea only 2 or 3 kilometers away from the beach, and poured shells into the positions of the British and Indian troops in a really crazy manner. These small and medium caliber naval gun shells may not be as powerful as large caliber naval guns. However, for these ordinary soldiers, it is still a deadly threat. Boom, boom, boom. Dense shells fell on the beach, and there were continuous explosions. The British and Indian soldiers who were hiding in the trenches and firing were torn to pieces in the explosion. Many soldiers of the British and Indian army died before firing a single shot. Damn it, the Germans got fire support from naval warships. Their artillery fire was so fierce that we couldn't resist their attack at all. A British officer saw this scene, wanting to cry without tears. What to do? No one would have expected that the Germans would land in Alibag. We have already reported to Mumbai, but it will take at least 2 or 3 hours for Mumbai's reinforcement to arrive. And in 2 or 3 hours, the Germans have captured Alibag. Indeed, the German army would choose Alibag as the landing point, which completely exceeded the expectations of the British. This made them have no preparations at all, and only deployed a few thousand people here. The British and Indian army currently has 25 group armies, but only 3 group armies have combat effectiveness in front of them. Among them, the 1st army stayed in Delhi, the 2nd army was stationed in Mumbai, and the 3rd army was stationed in Calcutta. The remaining 22 newly formed group armies were deployed elsewhere. Although the British and Indian troops are strong, their combat effectiveness is very bad. Many people have just learned how to shoot. As for whether it can hit the target, it depends on God's will. Other combat literacy is even less pitiful. Once such a force encounters the most powerful German army in the world, it is naturally conceivable what kind of consequences it will have. The interception of the British and Indian troops had no impact on the German Marine Corps at all. Originally, it should be the most dangerous, before washing up on the beach. However, in this battle, the British and Indian troops caused hardly decent losses to the German Marine Corps. Soon, the first landing craft washed up on the beach. More than a dozen Marines jumped from the top. The landing craft that washed up on the beach is very dangerous, and it is very likely that it will become the target of concentrated shooting by the enemy. Therefore, after the Marines landed, they had to flee as soon as possible. Sure enough, they were hit by intensive firepower from the British and Indian troops. Although a steel plate is installed in front of the landing craft, it can withstand bullets. but there were none on both sides, and they were battered and battered directly in the battle. Marines who have just landed are often very dangerous. They sprawled on the beach, bullets whizzing past their heads. If you look up without paying attention, you may be hit. Ordinary people simply cannot bear that kind of psychological pressure. As more and more landing craft washed up on the beach, more and more Marines landed. They gradually began to counterattack, and with the strong fire support of the naval fleet, they broke through the defense line of the British and Indian troops. Under the heavy shelling of the German fleet, the British and Indian troops suffered heavy casualties. After being fiercely attacked by the German Marine Corps, it collapsed very quickly. In less than half an hour, the 1st Regiment of the 3rd Division of the German Marine Corps occupied the beach and opened up a safe landing field. Subsequently, it launched an attack on the city of Alibag. With heavy losses and low morale, the British and Indian troops stationed in Alibag collapsed directly. This made it easy for the German Marines to occupy here. Best of all, the port is virtually intact. Other units of the Marine Corps, which had already been prepared, and the elite infantry division of the Army's 8th Army, also began to land. Winning Alibag is only the first step. To defeat the British and Indian troops stationed in Mumbai and win the entire Mumbai is a victory. Chapter 914, Counterattack. Mumbai, the 2nd Army Command of the British Indian Army. The commander, Admiral Howard, was frowning. The news of the German army landing in Alibag had been reported to him. However, he hasn't figured out how to deal with and solve this problem. As the 3 most elite armies of the British and Indian Army, the 2nd Army is very powerful. Except for the British troops stationed in India, they are the strongest. Therefore, Lord William Nicholson will also deploy the 2nd Army of the British and Indian Army in Mumbai. After entering Mumbai, Admiral Howard and the 2nd Army were preparing to fight. Mumbai has too many people to evacuate all of them. Admiral Howard didn't care about the life and death of those Indian natives, so he directly built fortifications in the city, preparing to resist the German attack in the city. As for whether this will cause civilian casualties, it is not up to him to decide. In the port of Mumbai, Admiral Howard also planted a large amount of explosives, preparing to detonate these explosives when the German troops landed in the port. In this case, not only can the Germans be unable to use the port of Mumbai, but it can also cause great damage to the Germans, which is undoubtedly killing 2 birds with 1 stone. As for defending Mumbai, the living general has never thought about it. After all, he knew the combat effectiveness of the British and Indian troops he commanded. Even if the troops under his command are all composed of British, he has no confidence. What's more, most of the troops under his command are Indian natives. "General, your lord's telegram," a staff officer reported. After Admiral Howard read the telegram, he finally showed a smile on his face. Lord William Nicholson has issued an order that the several armies on the west coast of India are all under his control for the time being. That is to say, in name Admiral Howard has been able to command and mobilize these British and Indian troops deployed on the west coast. In addition to the 2nd Army, there are 7 other British and Indian Army groups deployed on the west coast. Order: the subordinate departments of the 2nd Army to deploy the 11th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th Infantry Divisions to attack Alibag. Order the 11th Army of the British and Indian Army to attack Alibag from the south. The 12th Army rushed to Mumbai to participate in the battle. This time, we must drive the Germans into the sea before the Germans can gain a firm foothold, Admiral Howard ordered. Yes, General. The staff officer immediately went to give the order. This time, 6 main infantry divisions and 2 ordinary army groups were dispatched, with a total of more than 500,000 people. It should be able to withstand the German attack, right? Admiral Howard said secretly. When the British and Indian troops began to mobilize, the German Marines had already captured Alibag. Moreover, the 3rd Division of the Marine Corps and the main force of the 8th Army of the Army began to disembark quickly through the port of Alibag. Admiral Ludendorff knows that now is to compete with the British for time. It is necessary to send as many main forces ashore as possible before the British counterattack. In this way, it is possible to resist the British attack. General, the Navy's seaplane detected that a large number of British and Indian troops are approaching Alibag. Not only there are British and Indian troops in the north, but also in the south. It is expected that they will attack us in 3 hours, a staff officer reported. How many troops can we go ashore before the British launch a counterattack? Admiral Ludendorff frowned. General Alibag's port is too small. According to the current speed, apart from the 3rd Marine Division, probably only the 1st Infantry Division can go ashore. In addition, the 2nd Infantry Division may be able to go ashore for a regiment. Staff officer. The officer reported. No, too few. We have to face the attack of hundreds of thousands of British and Indian troops. Let the landing craft of the Marine Corps join the transfer force. Even if heavy weapons cannot go ashore, light weapons and people must go ashore. Firepower for support. You can find the Indian Ocean Fleet. Admiral Ludendorff said. Yes, General. The staff officer immediately went to make arrangements. The landing craft of the Marine Corps can directly send people to the beach. Although it is impossible to help transport heavy weapons, there is still no problem with transporting personnel. In this way, as many troops as possible can be sent ashore before the British and Indian troops launched an attack, thereby resisting the British and Indian troops' counterattack. Before the main force went ashore, the situation of the German army was not so good. If they were not careful, they might suffer failure or even be driven into the sea. In that case, the German army may become the laughingstock of the whole world. This will not only have a great impact on Germany's occupation of India, but will even affect Germany's prestige in the world. Contact the Indian Ocean Fleet. We need more support. Admiral Ludendorff said. When the army was unable to bring heavy weapons ashore, the fire support relied only on the Navy's warships. Fortunately, the Indian Ocean Fleet has assembled its main force to ensure the success of the 8th Army's landing this time. Yes, General. Soon, there was a reply from the Indian Ocean Fleet, and the commander of the fleet, Lieutenant General Engineer, assured that the Indian Ocean Fleet would provide comprehensive fire support to the 8th Army. When the Indian Ocean Fleet bombarded Alibag before, it only dispatched 2 capital ships. The remaining 5 capital ships are all on standby. This time, Lieutenant General Engineer has ordered the remaining 5 capital ships to rush to the theater. Time passed by 1 minute and 1 second. The British and Indian troops are rushing to Alibag, and they are going to drive them into the sea to feed the fish before the German army has a firm foothold point, and the German army is also taking the time to disembark, try their best to send more troops ashore before the counterattack of the British and Indian troops begin, to ensure that they can resist the attack of the British and Indian troops in the next battle. And then they can let the main force goes ashore. Once the main force of the German army has landed, it will not be a big problem to sweep the entire India with their combat effectiveness. How long will it take for the 4th Army to arrive? Admiral Ludendorff asked. The former commander of the 4th Army, the Duke of Württemberg, was killed. After the war, Qin Tian cleaned up the 4th Army and replaced those officers who had connections with the Duke of Württemberg. At the same time, the proportion of troops in other regions in this group army has been increased to ensure the control of this group army. Of course, after the large-scale reorganization and re-equipment, the combat effectiveness of the 4th Army not only did not decline, but also increased. General, it is estimated that the 4th Army will take 3 more days to reach the battlefield. Chapter 915. The attack is frustrated. Bastard. Hurry up, everyone. The British officer on a horse beat the Indian soldier northward with a whip in his hand. The Indian soldier screamed and fell into the mud pit. The division has issued an order. We must rush to Alibag within 2 hours. Otherwise, we will all be dealt with by military law, and there will be no good fruit. The British officer's face was full of indifference. In his eyes, these Indian soldiers cannot be regarded as human beings at all. At most they are a group of cannon fodder. Therefore, they didn't care about the life and death of these Indian soldiers at all. The short, sallow and thin Indian soldiers had to speed up. Although all of them were exhausted and out of breath, if they didn't want to be whipped, they could only increase their speed as much as possible. Otherwise, they might be beaten to death by those officers. Under the urging of the officers, the British and Indian troops marched relatively fast. However, it is very difficult to say how much combat effectiveness these Indian soldiers, who are not very good in physique, have left in Alibag after such a forced march. At noon, the vanguard of the British and Indian troops arrived in Alibag. When they arrived, the soldiers collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath one by one. Get up quickly. Seeing the appearance of these Indian soldiers, the British officer was very dissatisfied. In such a state, it is simply impossible to get them involved in the offense. General Howard, the commander of the Second Army of the British and Indian Army, is also having a headache for the state of the troops. As a last resort, he could only give an order to rest for an hour after the troops arrived. No matter what, if you want the troops to attack, you must let they have physical strength. Everyone is so tired that they can't even stand up. How can they fight? And this gave the Germans more time, and more troops could disembark. The German 71st Infantry Division, 72nd Infantry Division, 73rd Infantry Division and 74th Infantry Division all successfully disembarked. No matter, the two infantry divisions behind did not carry heavy weapons, only light weapons. But even so, more than 30,000 people from two infantry divisions went ashore, which greatly improved the combat effectiveness of the German army, which was enough to resist the attack of the British and Indian troops. At 1:30 in the afternoon, Admiral Howard, the commander of the Second Army of the British and Indian Army, issued an order to attack. The 6 main infantry divisions of the Second Army of the British and Indian Army, together with the 12th Army of the British and Indian Army, launched an attack on Alibag from the north. The 11th Army of the British and Indian Army an attack from the south. However, because Alibag is just a small city, even though the British and Indian troops have arrived with so many troops, there are not many troops that can be invested in the attack at the same time. At one time, more than 100,000 troops can be invested at most. The Germans had already landed 4 infantry divisions and 1 marine division, although their strength was less than 100,000. However, it is completely enough for defense. What's more, there is also naval fire support. It is undoubtedly easier to hold the position and resist the attack of the British and Indian troops. Attack. Defeat the Germans and drive them all into the sea to feed the fish. Otherwise, the whole of India will be finished. The frontline officers of the British Army issued orders loudly. Countless Indian soldiers, with red eyes, launched an attack. Although, those British officers treated them like pigs and dogs. However, for the future of India, they all endured. Many Indian soldiers are members of the Congress Party or the Green Party Alliance, or people influenced by these parties. They all know that the British promised that, as long as the Germans are defeated, they will allow India to gain autonomy and gain independence step by step. This is undoubtedly the dream of all Indians. So, even though they knew that the Germans were very powerful and that they would die if they fought with the Germans, these Indian soldiers were fearless. They hoped to use their sacrifices in exchange for a bright future for India. During the offensive, the British and Indian troops fully utilized their strength advantages. More than 100,000 people launched an attack. Because the German army's position is not wide, the queue of the British and Indian troops is very crowded. Contact the fleet and let them fire. Let these damned Indians taste the power of our naval guns. The German commander on the front line ordered. Although the combat effectiveness of the British and Indian troops is terrible, they have too many troops. If you don't pay attention, the German army will suffer casualties. Because of the limited force, the German generals hope that they can pay as few casualties as possible during the battle. In this case, the German firepower advantage must be maximized. On the sea, the 7 capital ships of the German Navy's Indian Ocean Fleet lined up, all of which had already slashed their hulls and aimed their sides at the coast. The main cannons have already raised their barrels, and their ferocious missiles are pointing at the sky. The shells are loaded and ready to fire at any time. Fire. When the coordinates were sent, the main guns of these battleships were adjusted immediately. Then the gunnery commander gave the order to fire. Boom. 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 The 380mm main guns of the capital ship began to fire one after another. Other light cruisers and destroyers also opened fire violently. Cannonballs flew towards the battlefield under the action of huge kinetic energy. When shells fell from the sky one after another, causing asterisk storms among the ranks of Indian soldiers, those Indian natives who went to the battlefield full of passion to serve their country knew how cruel war is. Boom. Boom. The shells kept falling, and almost every shell exploded, taking away countless lives. I don't know how many Indian aborigines have dedicated their lives to their ideals. The powerful artillery fire of the German army changed the expressions of all the British officers. Many people were fortunate that they didn't need to participate in the attack, otherwise, they would have been torn to pieces. The fighting will of the British and Indian soldiers was not high. Under such fierce artillery fire, many people were terrified. Even before rushing to the front of the German position, they were frightened and collapsed. Subsequently, the distraught Admiral Howard once again issued an order to attack. He demanded that the British and Indian troops launch an attack at all costs and drive the German troops into the sea no matter what. However, the final result was that countless corpses were left in front of the German positions. At the same time, the morale of the troops has also suffered a devastating blow. Those Indian natives who had just joined the army even began to flee. Such a situation is obviously not a good start for the British and Indian troops. Chapter 916. Defeat. Boom. 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 German naval guns, fierce shelling. The artillery of the German army also joined it. These artillery shells that caused heavy casualties fell from the sky to the attacking British and Indian troops. It can be said that this is definitely the most violent shelling experienced by these British and Indian troops from birth to the present. In the eyes of many people, this even seems like a scene from hell. Lord Shiva, are the Germans devil-like? Otherwise, how could they have a powerful attack like a devil? How could we beat the devil-like Germans? Run away. If you don't run away, we will die. Those Indian soldiers forgot their mission and responsibilities and ran away. At this time, finding a way to save your own life is the most important thing. The offensive of the British and Indian troops could not even penetrate the German artillery blockade, let alone pose a threat to the German defense line. Even if they were lucky enough to break through the German artillery blockade, what awaited them was the intensive firepower on the German positions. This caused the British army to pay a lot of casualties, but it was still unable to break through the German defense line. In the case of not seeing victory and just dying, even the elite troops will suffer a devastating blow to their morale. What's more, these British and Indian troops with low combat effectiveness and weak fighting will, General, this is the 5th time we have failed. Our army alone has suffered more than 50,000 casualties. It's only been half a day. If this continues, our entire army will collapse. Lieutenant General Paul, commander of the 11th Army of the British Indian Army, complained. Although the 11th Army is a newly formed force, its combat effectiveness is already bad, but such a big loss still made him very distressed. General Paul, there is no other way. The German firepower is too powerful, and I know you have suffered a lot, but now, we have no other way but to continue. Don't worry, your troops, I will ask Your Excellency the Commander to supplement you as soon as possible. We are fighting in India now, and India has the least shortage of soldiers, Admiral Howard said. Lieutenant General Paul didn't say much. What he was afraid of was that his troops would be disabled, thus making himself a poor commander. If it can be supplemented, then there is nothing. As Admiral Howard said, India has no shortage of population and soldiers, and it can be replenished, no matter how much it loses. It's getting dark now. Let's take a break and continue our offensive tomorrow. Although the Germans have strong firepower, they need to consume a lot of ammunition. Their supplies have to be shipped all the way from Germany. Once they are out of supplies, and we win, Admiral Howard said. It's just that all the British generals present sneered. Since the Germans launched the Indian War, how could it be impossible to guarantee the consumption of troops? With Germany's industrial strength and naval transportation capabilities, even if war breaks out in any corner of the world, they will be able to guarantee the supply of the German army. The headquarters of the German 8th Army has been moved from the Navy's transport ship to the beach. Although, this is somewhat dangerous. Admiral Ludendorff, however, didn't care. He always believed that it was impossible for the British and Indian troops to break through the German blockade, and the cannons of the British and Indian troops, under the threat of the German naval guns, could not hit the beach. So Admiral Ludendorff is actually pretty safe. General, the offensive of the British and Indian troops has stopped. A major general and division commander reported to General Ludendorff, HMPH. Idiots. Are they giving our troops time on purpose? After our main force goes ashore, they will have no chance. Since the enemy wants to give us time, we are very grateful to them. Jane has not yet. The disembarking troops should speed up and strive to disembark all before dawn tomorrow. At that time, it is time for us to launch a counterattack. Admiral Ludendorff ordered. Yes, General. the British and Indian troops stopped attacking, which just gave the Germans more time to disembark the troops calmly. At the disembarkation speed of the German army, if those heavy weapons are not considered, it will not be a big problem to disembark all the troops of the 8th Army in one afternoon and one night. That night, Alibag's pier was brightly lit. Teams of German soldiers disembarked from the transport ship, and after completing their formation on the pier, they headed to the resting place under the leadership of the officers. They must recharge their batteries, so that they can defeat the British and Indian troops in the next battle and win this battle. Time passed by 1 minute and 1 second. More and more German troops successfully landed, which made the disadvantage of the German army in this battle gradually disappear. After the sun rose the next day, the British-Indian army's offensive began again. However, their attack is still no different from sending them to death. In the face of the powerful firepower of the German army, their charges were all futile. Apart from the corpses left all over the place and the soldiers who have been frightened out of their wits, there are almost no other results. General, can we attack? The generals of the German 8th Army asked for a fight. Wait a second, since the British want those Indian natives to die, then don't stop them. Let them die as many people as possible. Only in this way can we defeat them at the lowest cost. Admiral Dendorf said. Yes, General. At noon, the British and Indian troops did not continue to attack, perhaps because of heavy losses. And this is no doubt the arrival of the fighter that Admiral Ludendorff has been waiting for. General Ludendorff immediately gave the order to attack, and the 10 infantry divisions of the 8th Army were divided into 2 groups to attack the British and Indian troops. Although, at this time, the strength of the German 8th Army was still far inferior to that of the British and Indian Army. However, in terms of combat effectiveness, it is far better than the British and Indian troops. This is especially true when the morale of the British and Indian troops has reached its lowest point. Facing the counter-attack of the German army, the British and Indian troops were beyond defense and could not resist at all. This made the German counter-attack very successful. A large number of British and Indian troops began to flee. They threw away their weapons and fled to Mumbai. Even Admiral Howard, the commander of the 2nd Army of the British and Indian Army, also fled. The outcome of this battle is naturally doomed. A large number of Indian soldiers who were being chased had no choice but to raise their hands and surrender to the German army when they had nowhere to escape. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 917. Erosion. General, we have defeated the British and Indian troops. A large number of British and Indian troops have been defeated and are fleeing towards Mumbai. A major general and division commander reported to General Ludendorff. Very well, start the pursuit immediately. Mumbai must be taken in one go. Admiral Ludendorff ordered. Now, it is undoubtedly a good opportunity to win Mumbai. As long as the German army takes Mumbai in this battle, the heavy weapons and equipment of the German army will be able to disembark. In particular, the combat effectiveness of the 8th Armored Division will be fully utilized. This will allow the German army to have a strong attack power, even if it leaves the coastline. Yes, General. Send a telegram to the Indian Ocean Fleet, asking them to give us greater fire support. However, let them pay attention when shelling, and don't blow up the port. Admiral Ludendorff ordered. Although, Admiral Ludendorff knew that the British and Indian troops would not let them get the port of Mumbai so easily. However, he still wanted to try his best to fight for it. If the port of Mumbai can be obtained, the loading and unloading speed of the German army's logistics supplies will be much faster. Mumbai would also become an important supply base for the German army. Yes, General. A staff officer immediately went to contact the Indian Ocean Fleet. Several infantry divisions of the German 8th Army had landed, and it was too late to clean up the battlefield, so they directly attacked Mumbai. As for the prisoners, they were handed over to the 3rd Division of the Marine Corps to guard them. The work of counting prisoners of war was also handed over to the Marine Corps. They simply don't have time for that. The Indian Ocean Fleet also cooperated very well with the attack of the German 8th Army. They went all the way north along the coastline, shelling the British and Indian troops according to the coordinates provided by the army. "Sir, the Germans are chasing us, what should we do?" An Indian native reported to a British major. "What else can we do? Keep running. Flee back to Mumbai, and we will be safe," the British major said. However, before he finished speaking, there was a howling sound in the sky. Immediately afterwards, large caliber naval gun shells fell from the sky. Boom. 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 A violent explosion sounded, and the shockwave spread around. Many Indian soldiers were swept into the sky like dead leaves. Shrapnel was shot in all directions, easily reaping the lives of these British and Indian Army officers and soldiers. Got the Germans' large caliber naval guns. "Surrender, we surrender. Otherwise, we will all die here," the British major yelled in horror. When the German army caught up, the hundreds of officers and soldiers of the British and Indian troops who stayed here surrendered directly to the German army. The British and Indian troops suffered heavy losses in the Battle of Alibag. At the same time, morale hit rock bottom. When they fled to Mumbai, they were even chased by the German army. There was heavy shelling by the German Indian Ocean Fleet. This not only further increased the losses of the British and Indian troops, but also caused them to collapse directly. In order to speed up their escape, many British and Indian soldiers even dropped their rifles and bullets. It can be said that after the disastrous defeat, the essence of the British and Indian troops was nothing more than a group of rabble, completely exposed. Many Indian soldiers threw away their weapons, took off their military uniforms, and fled directly. They were frightened by the powerful firepower of the German army, and they didn't dare to continue fighting at all. Many Indian soldiers surrendered to the German army when they saw the German army chasing them. On the 20-kilometer road from Alibag to Mumbai, the German army captured at least more than 100,000 British and Indian troops who surrendered. This directly caused the British and Indian troops to flee back to Mumbai, and there were not many troops at all. After the troops are gathered, "How many are there?" Admiral Howard asked. "General, there are too many broken troops. Many people fled directly or surrendered to the Germans. There are less than 200,000 people who can return to Mumbai." Admiral Howard almost didn't die of anger. When attacking Alibag, he mobilized 6 main infantry divisions of the 2nd Army, plus the 11th Army and the 12th Army, a total of more than 500,000 people. After a battle, more than half of them were directly lost. What's more, the remaining troops have no morale, and they don't have much fighting power at all. If you want to hold Mumbai, it is simply impossible. Bastard. How is this? Where are the Germans? How far are they from Bombay? Admiral Howard asked. "General, the Germans have been following us. Their vanguard has approached Mumbai." Boom. 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 At this time, violent explosions sounded in the urban area of Mumbai, and shells exploded in the urban area. Houses were destroyed in the explosion. Countless Indian natives ran out screaming. Then, a shell exploded among the crowd, tearing the native Indians to pieces. "General, Mumbai has been shelled by the German fleet. 7 battleships are firing on Mumbai," a staff officer reported with a look of horror. "God, are the Germans going to kill us all?" Admiral Howard looked aggrieved. Although, after being appointed as the commander of the 2nd Army stationed in Mumbai, he knew that this battle might be very difficult. But now, he realized that the difficulty of this battle was far beyond his expectations. His troops, under the attack of the Germans, looked so unbearable. His 2nd Army is definitely considered elite among the dozens of armies of the British and Indian Army. Even his troops are like this, let alone other troops. Although, it will be dark in 2 or 3 hours. However, the German army did not give the British and Indian troops a chance to breathe, and directly attacked the urban area of Mumbai. At this time, the British and Indian troops in Mumbai actually outnumbered the attacking German troops. However, these British and Indian troops are often defeated at the first touch, and they no longer have the courage to continue fighting. Admiral Howard saw this, and knew that, if he continued to defend Mumbai, he would only get himself involved. So, Admiral Howard issued an order to retreat. Before retreating, however, he demanded that the port of Bombay be destroyed. Even if it is destroyed, the port will not be left to the German army. However, it is a pity that the British and Indian troops did not fully implement this order when they executed it. Although some of Mumbai's ports were bombed, there are still several piers that can continue to be used. Even those docks that were blown up can be easily repaired. After the German army captured Mumbai, it immediately attacked north along the coastline. At the same time, the German Fourth Army also arrived. After landing in Mumbai, it attacked south along the coastline. The British and Indian troops on the entire west coast of India could not withstand the German attack. Chapter 918, Internal Strife. On February 21st, the German 8th Army captured Mumbai, and then the 8th Army advanced north along the coastline. A day later, the German 4th Army landed in Mumbai, and then the 4th Army attacked south along the coastline. Two armies, one north and one south, swept across the west coast of India. At the same time, the Indian Ocean Fleet provided fire support for the two armies throughout the entire process. Under the fierce attack of the German army, the British and Indian troops could not resist the German attack at all. It can be said that the British and Indian troops on the entire west coast are retreating. The battle situation has become more and more unfavorable to the British and Indian troops. Delhi, British Indian Command. Baron Charles Harding, Governor General of India. Tilak, Gandhi and Nehru of the Congress Party and Jinnah of the Green Party alliance all rushed here. They put all their strength into this battle with the German army. However, the current development of the war situation made them very worried. Your Excellency, how is the current war going? Can we resist the German attack? Baron Charles Harding frowned tightly. He is also very pessimistic about the current situation. If this continues, it may be very difficult for them to resist the German attack in India. Once the plan fails, the German army will capture the whole of India. What's more terrible is that the power of Indian aboriginals will also be greatly weakened during the war. At that time, the German rule in India will become very stable, because those who dare to resist have almost died in this war, and the rest are those who have been tamed and content with being oppressed and exploited. Your Excellency, the current situation is indeed very unfavorable to us. The fighting power of the Germans is too strong. Their 2 legions, 400,000 people, beat the more than 1 million people we deployed on the west coast. They have already been swept away by them. Lord William Nicholson looked helpless. He had to admit that the current situation was completely beyond his expectations. The strength of the German army and the weakness of the British and Indian troops were beyond his expectations. This led to the defeat of the British and Indian troops in this war. Your Excellency, does this mean that we are going to lose this war? Tilak asked. The expressions on the faces of several Indian elites were not very good looking. The news they got was that most of the British and Indian troops were on the west coast. Not to mention the fall of Mumbai, even the entire west coast is about to be captured by the Germans. British and Indian troops suffered heavy losses, especially Indian soldiers. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed or injured. More were captured or escaped. It is too early to say that we have lost this war. Although we have lost a lot, we still have millions of troops. In addition, the mobilization of the second batch is also very fast, and a large number of troops are being formed. There is still enough strength to fight the Germans. Lord William Nicholson said. Although he is also very pessimistic about the current war situation, he will never admit that the war cannot go on. Your Excellency, our people suffered heavy casualties. Those are young Indians, good lads from India. Although we know that for India's independence, we must pay a certain loss. However, such a loss is too much. Big. I hope His Excellency will still consider them when commanding operations, and don't let them make unnecessary sacrifices. Gandhi said. Although they all promised to fully cooperate with the British and Indian colonial authorities at the beginning, and they were prepared to sacrifice many compatriots. But now, the loss has far exceeded their expectations. This immediately made Gandhi and others very regretful, because they know that, if such losses continue, India may lose millions or even more young people. Although India has a large population, there is no shortage of soldiers. But those who died were young men in their 20s. These young men are the middle force of a nation. If there are too many losses, this will have a great impact on India's future. Baron Charles Harding and Lord William Nicholson's faces are not very good looking. It is undoubtedly an extremely bad phenomenon that those Indian natives dare to criticize them. I don't have any problems with my command. The combat effectiveness of the British and Indian troops is too bad. We have some weapons and equipment, although they are a little worse than the Germans. However, the gap is very limited. If the soldiers of the British and Indian troops can be braver when fighting, maybe the battle situation will not be like this, Lord William Nicholson said. He put all the responsibility on the Indian soldiers. Suddenly, the faces of Tilak and the others became even uglier. Their people shed blood and died on the battlefield, but not only were they not respected, but they were insulted. It would be unbearable for anyone. Your Excellency, I'm afraid you are biased in saying this. I admit that the combat effectiveness of Indian soldiers may not be strong, but this is not their reason. They have been treated unfairly for a long time, with the lowest salary, but they have to engage in all kinds of jobs that have nothing to do with fighting. And their training is pitiful. The Germans came, but you sent them to the battlefield in a hurry. Now you can't beat the Germans, but instead you shift the responsibility. It's really inappropriate for them to fall on them. Tilak's face was full of anger. Lord William Nicholson was about to rebut, but Lord Charles Harding stopped him. Okay, stop arguing. The Germans are about to fight, but we have internal strife. If this is the case, how can we defeat the Germans? Baron Charles Harding said with a dark face. For a while, everyone shut up. Baron Charles Harding, as the Governor of India, is still very prestigious. The current war situation is very unfavorable to us, but I believe we still have a chance to defeat the Germans. The more we are at this time, the more we must unite. Otherwise, there is really no chance. Your Excellency, I hope that in the next battle, you can come up with a practical way to defeat the Germans at the least cost and win this war. Baron Charles Harding said. Yes, Your Excellency the Governor. Lord William Nicholson nodded. Tilak and the others, it's hard to say anything more. After all, it was for the promise of Baron Charles Harding that they agreed to cooperate with the British and Indian colonial authorities. If the two parties fall out, it will not be of any benefit to them. Chapter 919, Decisive Battle. Baron Charles Harding appeased Tilak and others, assuring them that, although the current battle situation is not good for the British and Indian troops, they still hold a great advantage, and promised that the conditions he promised before will never be discounted in the slightest. After they defeat the Germans, they must allow India to self-govern and eventually achieve independence. Tilak and others asked the British and Indian colonial authorities to ensure the safety of Indian soldiers fighting on the front line as much as possible and not allow them to sacrifice needlessly. Baron Charles Harding naturally agreed to this. It's just that Tilak and others don't know what he thinks in his heart. In fact, Baron Charles Harding also didn't care about the life and death of Indian natives. What he cares about is how to win this battle. As long as he can defeat the Germans, he is willing to kill, no matter how many people die. Of course, the prerequisite is that these people who died were all Indians, not British. Compared with Indians, the lives of British people are undoubtedly much more precious. Your Excellency, the authorities are under a lot of pressure now, because we need to rely on those Indian natives to gather troops for us. We can't fall out with them yet. When we defeat the Germans and get through this crisis, sometimes it's time to settle accounts with them. So, for the time being, you need to be more patient, said Baron Charles Harding. Lord William Nicholson nodded. He knew Baron Charles Harding's plan and knew that the focus now was to deal with the Germans. As for the indigenous Indians, the two parties are still in a cooperative relationship. If you want to tear up the cooperation and turn to Indian natives, you have to wait until the Germans are defeated. Now is not the time to tear your face apart. Otherwise, it will be quite troublesome. After we defeat the Germans, we must completely eradicate these guys. Otherwise, our rule in India will not last long. Lord William Nicholson said. Yes, no matter what, those guys can't stay. Of course, if we try our best and can't beat the Germans, then let them fight those guys. Let the Germans spend more energy a little in India. The British Empire will be relatively safer. Baron Charles Harding said. If Baron Charles Harding was full of confidence in this plan before, then his confidence is not so full now. Your Excellency, the combat staff have submitted a battle plan. If we can succeed, we may be able to defeat the Germans. Lord William Nicholson said. Oh, what plan, Charles? Baron Harding asked. The reason why the Germans were able to defeat us on the west coast was that their fleet played a big role. The main guns of the battleships were so powerful that they frightened the native Indians, especially those Indian natives who had just joined the army. As long as the German fleet bombards them, they will collapse immediately. If this is the case, the battle cannot be fought at all, Lord William Nicholson said. Baron Charles Harding nodded. The German artillery fire is too strong, which is indeed a very big problem. It can be said that, since the last World War, the Germans have used their firepower to the extreme. Whether it is the artillery of the army or the naval guns of the navy, they all deal a strong blow to the enemy, enabling them to gain an advantage in the war. In many cases, the troops of the Allied power suffered losses in this regard, which made them lose the battle. So, the combat staff proposed to fight the Germans far away from the coast. In this way, we don't have to worry about being attacked by the German fleet. In this way, we can gather superior forces, launch a siege against the Germans, and encircle and wipe out them in one fell swoop, take down their troops and win the war, said Lord William Nicholson. That's a good idea. Baron Charles Harding nodded. If you can effectively restrain the strengths of the German army and bring out your own strengths, it is entirely possible to defeat the Germans. Your Excellency, we plan to attack the German 8th Army first. This plan is to attack northward. Their destination is undoubtedly Delhi, and we can just gather the elite forces near Delhi and besiege they, continued Lord William Nicholson. The 8th Army? That was Kaiser Wilhelm III's first army. Among the German army, it is also the most powerful army. If this army can be eaten, I think the Kaiser will be furious. This is for Germany. It is also a great blow to the morale of the people. I agree to gather the main force and launch an attack on the German 8th Army, Baron Charles Harding said. The 8th Army has a great reputation, especially because Qin Tian served as the commander of the 8th Army, which made this army call itself the Emperor's Imperial Guard. Of course, the combat effectiveness of the 8th Army is beyond doubt. Before the military reform, the 1st Army had more than 300,000 troops and was strong, making it the most powerful of the many German armies. However, after the military reform, each group army has only 200,000 people. Under the same strength, the combat effectiveness of the 8th Army is naturally better. It can be seen from this that the 8th Army is the most powerful army of the German army, which is beyond doubt. Your Excellency, if we can eat the German 8th Army in one fell swoop, then we have a great chance of winning this battle. After eating the 8th Army, the remaining German 4th Army will not be enough, forget it. If we gather the main force, we can still eat them. Of course, the premise is that the Germans will not send more troops to the Indian battlefield. In that case, it will be very difficult for us to win. William Nick Lord Delson Books. Well, then in this battle, we have to devote all our main force. Baron Charles Harding said. Yes, Your Excellency Governor. I plan to devote all the British troops stationed in India to this battle. In addition, the 1st Army of the British Indian Army, the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 9th 10, all of these group armies will also participate in this battle. This time, we will invest as many as 1.8 million people. Among them, 200,000 are the elite British Army. We will definitely be able to solve the Germans' first attack. The 8th Army. William Nicholson was full of confidence. Then, this battle is the decisive battle of the entire Indian battlefield. God will bless us and defeat the Germans. Chapter 920, Bloody Battle. General, something is wrong. We have advanced 100 kilometers, and now we have reached Ahmedabad, but we still haven't found any troops from the British and Indian troops. It seems that the British and Indian troops have disappeared out of thin air. Same. Major General Balfours, commander of the 71st Infantry Division, reported to General Ludendorff. Admiral Ludendorff couldn't help but frown. Is there any other news? We learned from the local Indians that the British and Indian troops began to retreat a week ago. Major General Balfour said. A week ago. It seems that the British and Indian troops are shrinking their forces on purpose. Order the 3rd Division of the Marine Corps to send 2 regiments to Baroda, set up a logistics supply base there, and shorten the logistics supply line. The whole army continues march to Delhi. Admiral Ludendorff ordered. General, the British are obviously shrinking their forces and want to concentrate their forces to deal with us. If we continue to advance, will we fall into their trap? Lieutenant General Lundstedt, Chief of Staff of the Group Army, was a little worried. Of course I know that those guys are up to no good. On our way to Delhi, there will be a **** battle. However, I think that, even if they muster more troops, we will be able to defeat them. Is it? Goodly General Anne? Admiral Ludendorff asked. Yes, General. The 8th Armored Division will crush all enemies, said Lieutenant General Guderian, commander of the 8th Armored Division. As one of the youngest generals of the German army, Guderian and his armored forces performed very brilliantly in the last war. Of course, this is also the reason why he was able to be promoted to lieutenant general at the age of 28. The only one who can compare with him in the German army is probably only Major General Rommel, who served as the commander of the 4th Armored Division. Very good. I believe we will be able to defeat those British and Indian natives, Admiral Ludendorff said confidently. The other generals nodded one after another. As generals of the German army, they are very proud, because they have always been the most powerful army in the world. The British are nothing more than their defeated opponents, and even the mainland has fallen. Even if they win over a large number of Indian natives in India to work for them, they will never change the reality of their defeat. The generals of the German army also believed that they could also defeat these guys in this battle. The German 8th Army continued to approach Delhi, but at a slower speed, and at the same time, paid attention to the protection of the logistics supply line. After all, India's land area is too vast, and Delhi is far away from the coast. In the absence of fleet fire support, everything depends on the army itself. On March 28th, the vanguard of the German 8th Army approached Jaipur, which is less than 200 kilometers away from Delhi. However, after the 71st Infantry Division, which served as the forward, launched a tentative attack, it did not defeat the British and Indian troops. At the same time, the dispatched reconnaissance troops also found that there were British and Indian troops everywhere. Major General Balfour immediately reported the situation to General Ludendorff. Admiral Ludendorff ordered Major General Balfour to immediately retreat to Ajmer and stand by for help. At the same time, the 72nd Infantry Division was ordered to rush for reinforcement. The other troops continued to advance at the existing speed. General Ludendorff believed that even in the face of the siege of the British and Indian troops 10 times larger than himself, the 2 German infantry divisions could easily hold on. He hoped to use the 71st Infantry Division and the 72nd Infantry Division as a magnet to attract the main force of the British and Indian Army to Ajmer, and then the 8th Army will use the 8th Armored Division as the main force to launch an attack and defeat the British in one fell swoop. Indian Army. After Major General Balfour retreated to Ajmer, he immediately began to build a defensive position. Even though this is just a small town, it is not difficult to accommodate 2 German infantry divisions. Lord William Nicholson, who personally commanded this decisive battle, did not give up the decisive battle because the German army retreated. Instead, he ordered the 1st Army, 4th Army and 6th Army of the British and Indian Army to march towards Ajmer. The British Army stationed in India and the rest of the group armies also pressed on Ajmer, but did not participate in the battle. Lord William Nicholson was also well aware that the main body of the German army had not yet been revealed. On March 31st, the 3 armies of the British and Indian Army, 600,000 people, launched an attack on Ajmer. Their strength is almost 20 times that of the 2 German infantry divisions stationed here. It's just that, unfortunately, in defensive operations, the German firepower has always been very powerful. Facing the powerful firepower of the German army, the attacking enemy will pay an unimaginable price. The German army has 2 infantry divisions and more than 200 artillery pieces. In terms of the number of artillery, it is not inferior to the 3 armies of the British and Indian armies, except for the 1st British and Indian Army, which was equipped with more than 100 cannons. The other British and Indian Army groups were only equipped with a small number of cannons. Even a group army has only a few dozen doors. Especially after the German Navy blocked the coast of India, they were even less able to get artillery supplements. Fierce battles ensued, and the British and Indian troops had no choice but to use the crowd tactics when artillery could not take advantage of it. They sent a large number of troops, attacking again and again. However, in the face of the powerful firepower of the German army, it did not take advantage of it at all, leaving a large number of corpses. For 5 days in a row, the British Army's attacks became fiercer each time, but the German Army's defense line was rock solid. With heavy losses, the British Army did not cause more casualties to the German Army at all, except that the German Army consumed a lot of ammunition. When Lord William Nicholson learned that the 1st Army, 4th Army, and 5th Army of the British and Indian Army had lost almost half of their losses, he had to deploy 2 armies again to attack Ajmer. In his hands, apart from the 200,000 British troops stationed in India, there are only 3 army groups left. General, the Germans' firepower is too strong. We don't have the advantage of artillery, so we can only rely on the soldiers to launch a desperate charge. This kind of tactics, the casualties of the troops are very large. The morale of the troops has also been greatly affected. A hero, said the general. I know all this. But, what can I do? The Germans have blocked the coastline, and we can't get supplies at all. Apart from people, we have no other advantages at all. Under such circumstances, is there any other way? Lord William Nicholson asked with a dark face. Indeed, apart from the large number of people, the British and Indian troops do not have any advantage at all. Chapter 921, Collapse. General, the 71st Infantry Division and the 72nd Infantry Division have lasted for 5 days. They have caused great casualties to the British and Indian troops. However, their ammunition has also consumed more than half, and they can last for another 3 days at most. I'm afraid they will have to break through and retreat. Otherwise, they will be surrounded and wiped out by the British and Indian troops because of the exhaustion of ammunition. Lieutenant General Lundstedt reported. Lieutenant General Lundstedt Ludendorff nodded. I see. The strength of the German army is largely due to the strong firepower of the German army. This makes the enemy have no other way when facing the powerful firepower of the German army. However, the powerful firepower also made the German troops very expensive. The pressure on logistical supplies is also great. If there is no ammunition, the weapons in the hands of the German army are no different from fire sticks. Once in hand-to-hand combat, although the strong German soldiers obviously have an advantage over the thin Indian soldiers, the so-called two fists are no match for 4 hands. At that time, the fate of the German army will be very miserable. Since the last World War, the German army has never had a martyr whose infantry divisions were systematically wiped out. If the German army lost 2 infantry divisions at one time on the Indian battlefield, it would definitely be a record. Of course, is a bad record. Even if General Ludendorff won Qin Tian's trust, he would definitely not be able to bear this responsibility. Therefore, Lieutenant General Ludendorff has no other choice. Send a telegram to the 8th Armored Division. 2 days later, launch an attack. Directly attack the main force of the British. There are not many British troops stationed in India, only more than 200,000. Now they are all concentrated in the north of Ajmer. I need the 8th Armored Division to defeat them. The 73rd Infantry Division and the 74th Infantry Division will act together with the 8th Armored Division. After defeating the British Army in India, expand the results as much as possible and defeat the British and Indian Army. Admiral Dendorf ordered. If the 71st Infantry Division and the 72nd Infantry Division on the front line still have enough ammunition, he hopes to launch the attack as late as possible. In this case, the British and Indian troops can pay a greater price in front of the solid German defense line. Unfortunately, the situation doesn't allow it. Yes, General. Lieutenant General Lundstedt immediately went to give the order. On the morning of April 3rd, the German 8th Armored Division, 73rd Infantry Division and 74th Infantry Division launched an offensive. In order to allow the 73rd Infantry Division and the 74th Infantry Division to keep up with the advancing speed of the 8th Armored Division, Admiral Ludendorff specially mobilized a large number of trucks for their use. The speed of the wheels of a car is naturally much faster than that of human legs. Although the British troops stationed in India were 50 kilometers away, 3 hours later, the German 8th Armored Division launched an attack on them. At this time, it was only 10 o'clock in the morning. The sudden attack of the German army made it impossible for the British troops stationed in India to guard against it. Even though these troops composed of British troops far surpassed the British and Indian troops in terms of combat effectiveness. However, facing the torrent of steel composed of more than 200 tanks, there is only one thing these British can do, and that is to run away immediately. Although, the British government in exile in Canada has begun to jointly develop new tanks with the Americans. But unfortunately, it has not been developed yet. Therefore, the British troops stationed in India will not be able to use those advanced tanks. The way they deal with tanks is nothing more than anti-tank weapons or attacks with cluster grenades and explosives. Such tactics are no different from those in the last World War. Facing the torrent of steel from the German army, such tactics are difficult to succeed. Under the crushing of the German tank tracks, the performance of these British people was not much better than that of the Indians. What about anti-tank guns? Stop the German tanks. Otherwise, our position will collapse. A brigadier general ordered. However, none of his officers and soldiers listened to him at all. Facing the German tanks, they believed that the only chance of survival was to flee immediately. If you stay and fight, there is only one dead end. After the fall of the mainland, although many British people are determined to revive the British Empire, however, it is undeniable that their morale has dropped very badly. In their hearts, they have already developed a fear of the Germans. When facing the German army, I didn't have the courage to continue fighting. Although, their combat literacy and the like may be much better than the Indians. But their fighting spirit is almost the same as that of Indians. Crunch, crunch. The tracks of the tank crushed the positions of the British troops stationed in India. With the assistance of the 8th Armoured Division, the 73rd Infantry Division and the 74th Infantry Division, which accompanied the 8th Armoured Division, broke through the defense line of the British troops stationed in India, and began to cooperate with the armoured forces, to wipe out the remaining enemies on the position. Expand the victories. The British troops stationed in India could not resist the German attack at all. A large number of British soldiers even raised their hands and surrendered. Many people fled to India from the British mainland. Although their combat effectiveness is very strong, they have already developed a fear of the German army. Under such circumstances, their performance is also very bad. After the collapse of the British army in India, it had a great impact on the British and Indian army. Before the Germans launched an offensive, they took the initiative to retreat. Moreover, it was not the retreat orders issued by the generals of the British army, and there was also no order from Lord William Nicholson. Those Indian soldiers retreated spontaneously. This is not for other reasons, but because they have all been frightened by the Germans. Therefore, it retreated directly. The British and Indian armies that were besieging Ajmer had already suffered heavy losses. After learning that the British troops stationed in India were defeated by the Germans. At the same time, after several group armies had retreated in a few days, they didn't even have the guts to continue fighting. If the German army encircled them, wouldn't they be dead? There were almost no other orders, and several British and Indian armies that besieged Ajmer also fled. When Lord William Nicholson learned that such a change had taken place in the battle situation, he was equally dumbfounded and couldn't believe such a fact at all. Before the decisive battle began, he was full of confidence in this battle. You know, he has assembled a full 1.8 million troops, including 200,000 elite troops composed of British. However, what he didn't expect was that the first to collapse was the British army in India, which he had placed high hopes on. Obviously, they failed again in this decisive battle. Chapter 922, Delhi fell. Your Excellency, let's go. The German armored forces are coming towards us. If we don't leave, it will be too late. The adjutant reported to Lord William Nicholson anxiously. How did this happen? Why did it happen like this? Why did we lose? We obviously have such a great chance of winning. Lord William Nicholson murmured. It seemed that at this time, he still couldn't accept this fact. Your Excellency, we have already lost. Although our troops are much more powerful than the Germans, our troops are vulnerable, and we simply don't have the courage to fight the Germans. Therefore, as soon as the Germans attack, our troops collapse. It is, said the adjutant. Is that so? It seems that we have a large number of troops, but in fact they are nothing more than a bunch of mobs. No matter how many troops there are, we still cannot defeat the Germans. Lord William Nicholson had a painful expression on his face. I closed my eyes. It is not unknown to him that the combat effectiveness of the British and Indian troops is low. However, he believes that quantitative changes can lead to qualitative changes. With millions of British and Indian troops, no matter how *** their combat effectiveness is, they are enough to withstand the German attack. However, it is a pity that the performance of the British and Indian troops was even worse than he imagined. What's more deadly is that the performance of the British troops stationed in India, which he placed high hopes on, was also very unbearable. This made Lord William Nicholson completely defeated in this crucial decisive battle. William, the new Lord Nicol, was distraught and left by car with his adjutant. A large number of British and Indian soldiers are fleeing to Delhi. The Germans launched a pursuit, especially by the 8th Armoured Division and the 73rd Infantry Division and the 74th Infantry Division. They were the fastest. Many British and Indian troops who fled along the road were chased by them. In desperation, the officers and soldiers of the British and Indian troops surrendered directly. Not only Indian soldiers, but even those British officers also chose to surrender. The war has reached the point where they have also lost confidence. The German 8th Army also did not expect that the victory would come so suddenly. General, we have won. After the 8th Armoured Division defeated the British Army in India, the British Indian Army has collapsed. Now, we are catching prisoners like crazy. I think we will soon be defeated because of too many prisoners. And, distressed, Lieutenant General Lundstedt reported. Admiral Ludendorff was also a little surprised. He had expected a big battle. He was even prepared that the 8th Army would pay a considerable price in this battle. However, I did not expect that the British and Indian troops would be so vulnerable. Even the British troops stationed in India seem to have been infected by these idiot-like British and Indian troops, and they no longer know how to fight. It seems that God is on our side. Admiral Ludendorff laughed. The heart that he had been hanging on for a long time was finally put back in his stomach. Order. The ministry is to capture as many prisoners of war as possible. In the next battle, we will directly attack Delhi. Eliminating as many vital forces as possible of the British and Indian troops will enable us to take Delhi faster. Luden said. Admiral Doffer ordered. Now, he no longer considered taking Delhi a problem. Yes, General. Lieutenant General Lundstedt immediately went to give the order. Originally, they all thought that only sending 2 armies to attack India would be a better battle. In other words, even if the whole of India can be conquered, it will definitely take a long time. However, the smoothness of the battle situation far exceeded their expectations. If this is the case, it may not be long before they will be able to end the war in India. The German 8th Army did not waste too much time. With the sharp arrows, composed of the 8th Armoured Division, the 73rd Infantry Division and the 74th Infantry Division, it was still approaching Delhi. The news of the disastrous defeat of the British and Indian troops in the decisive battle was transmitted back to Delhi immediately. After receiving the telegram, Lord Charles Hardinge, the Governor of India, couldn't believe the result. Damn, what's going on here? Did you send the wrong telegram? How could we lose? Lord William Nicholson has assembled all the main forces, and their opponent is only 200,000 Germans. It's just people. How could it be defeated? Baron Charles Hardinge questioned. Your Excellency, I have confirmed with the front line that we have indeed failed. The troops are fleeing, and the Germans are pursuing and approaching Delhi. It is estimated that they will come to Delhi soon. Secretary said with a bitter face. God, have you really abandoned the British Empire? We can't beat the Germans with such a big advantage. If this continues, aren't we doomed? Charles Hardinge had a pained expression on his face. For the first time, he felt that the plan he thought would surely succeed was so ridiculous now. Almost at the same time, the leaders of the Congress Party and the Green Party alliance also knew the situation on the front line. Similarly, each of them was shocked beyond measure. You know, for India to be independent, they fully cooperated with the British and Indian colonial authorities. But unexpectedly, it still failed in the end. This undoubtedly made their expectations turn into water. Once the British and Indian troops completely lost the war and the Germans occupied the whole of India, it would be completely impossible for them to gain national independence. What to do? What to do now? The British lost. We are finished. Tilak's eyes were blank. After the Germans captured India, they will definitely not let us go. Nehru panicked. Gandhi also had a bitter look on his face. No doubt he regretted it now too. It's just that, at this point, they have no other way. On April 14th, the German 8th Army came to Delhi. Although, the British and Indian troops have been trying to gather the defeated troops and then resist the German attack, But with neither the Congress Party nor the Green Party coalition fully backing them, they can't muster much troops at all. When the German 8th Army launched its offensive, there were less than 400,000 troops in Delhi. Among them, there are more than 100,000 British troops stationed in India. Although, they still have an advantage in terms of military strength. However, its combat effectiveness is far from being comparable to that of the German army. The German attack on Delhi lasted only 2 days. On the afternoon of April 16th, the whole of Delhi fell into the hands of the German army. Chapter 923, Landlord. The German combat operations in India have attracted worldwide attention. The British government, in exile in Canada, was particularly concerned. Although India is their best and richest colony, losing India will seriously damage the strength of the British Empire. However, it would be great if India could be used to hold back the Germans and drag the Germans into the quagmire of war. In that case, even if India is lost, the British Empire will not suffer. This is why when Baron Charles Harding reported to the cabinet and demanded that Indians be given self-government and even allow India to become independent, the British cabinet agreed. It's just that the Indians, who now seem to have high hopes, can't stop the Germans from advancing at all. In just 2 months, even the capital Delhi has fallen. At the same time, another group army of the Germans also defeated the British and Indian troops in southern India. It seems unlikely that the British and Indian troops who suffered heavy losses would drag the Germans in India or turn India into a war quagmire. What's more, heavy losses and repeated failures made both the Congress Party and the Green Party alliance disappointed with the British and Indian colonial authorities, and their cooperation was also on the verge of collapse. Under such circumstances, it is even more impossible for the British to rely on the strength of those Indian natives to resist the German attack. Such a result made the British cabinet very dissatisfied. However, they had no other choice but to allow the British and Indian colonial authorities to hold back the Germans as much as possible, so that the Germans would not occupy India so easily. Other countries believe that the German occupation of India is already a certainty. This rich colony of India has made the world's major powers salivate. The British occupied India before, and relying on India's wealth, they have occupied the throne of world hegemony for hundreds of years. Now, the Germans are occupying India. It is foreseeable that Germany, which occupies India, will take a lot of wealth from India. This will be of great help to the improvement of India's national strength. It will be even more difficult for other countries to compete with India. The British and Indian colonial authorities are about to fail in India, which makes the native Indians have other thoughts. The National Congress Party and the Green Party alliance have sent people to Germany one after another, hoping to contact the German government so that they can reach a result that is beneficial to them. After all, deep down in their hearts they still desire to make India independent. Before, they wanted to gain independence from the British. But now, since the British are gone, then they can only turn to the Germans. It's just that they fully cooperated with the British and opposed Germany before. It may be very difficult to get Germany to agree to let them be independent. What's more, Germany has just occupied India, and if it doesn't exploit India severely for a period of time and collect a lot of wealth from India, it is absolutely impossible to let India go. In addition to these parties in India, there is another force in India, that is, the Lord of India. Today's India has nearly 600 large and small states. Large states such as Hyderabad own nearly half of India's land and 1/3 of its population. When the British ruled India, these states were subject to the rule of the British. The landlord relied on Britain to maintain his rule. It's just that the British rule in India is about to collapse, which means that the good days of these sovereigns seem to be coming to an end. Therefore, those landlords also took active actions. In Berlin, the capital of Germany, Imperial Emperor Qin Tian is listening to India's combat operations. Your Majesty, at present, our combat operations in India are very smooth. We have wiped out more than half of the British and Indian troops and the British troops stationed in India. Although the expansion of the British and Indian troops is still going on. However, the lack of weapons and equipment, lack of training, and even the British and Indian troops who have no fighting spirit are nothing to worry about. It is estimated that in about 3 months, we will be able to take the whole of India. Falkenhayn, Minister of the Imperial Army and Chief of the General Staff the Marshal said proudly. The German army defeated the British and Indian army with millions or even tens of millions of troops with 400,000 troops. No matter how bad the combat effectiveness of the British and Indian troops was, it was not easy to achieve such a dazzling victory. A series of German victories in India undoubtedly proved once again that the combat effectiveness of the German army is invincible. As the Minister of War and Chief of the General Staff, Marshal von Falkenhayn naturally had a bright face. Qin Tian nodded. The 4th Army and the 8th Army fought very well on the Indian battlefield. The 8th Army, in particular, defeated the main force of the British and Indian armies in succession, and now it has even taken Delhi. Qin Tian is undoubtedly very satisfied with Ding Jun's performance on the Indian battlefield. Originally, Qin Tian also thought that it would take a long time for the German army to capture the whole of India under the circumstances of the British and Indian army's crazy military expansion. If the war is not going well, it is entirely possible to fight for a year or two. In that case, the German army would have to pay a considerable price in order to capture India. But what Qin Tian didn't expect was that the British and Indian troops would be so vulnerable that they were easily defeated by the German army. It now appears that the German army will be able to capture India in at most half a year. This will allow Germany to take India with minimal cost and then start to take away India's wealth. In this case, Germany's interests can be maximized. Your Majesty, people from the Indian National Congress Party and the Green Party Alliance want to talk to us, said Imperial Foreign Minister Vahid. Qin Tian shook his head. There is nothing to talk about. What those people want is India's independence, and the Empire will never agree to it. Besides, they fully supported the British and Indian colonial authorities in their confrontation with the Empire before. Now seeing that the British are dying and want to turn to the Empire to achieve their goals, how can there be such a cheap thing in the world? The military and political ministers of the Empire modestly repeatedly. The Empire captured India not to liberate those Indian natives, but to enslave and exploit them. Therefore, those people from the Congress Party and the Imperial government are born enemies. Except for those members of the Congress Party, Mir Osman Ali Khan, the ruler of the Indian state of Hyderabad, hopes to visit Germany secretly. Wahid said. The ruler of Hyderabad? Qin Tian touched his chin. Of course he knows Hyderabad, which is the largest state in India. Now, the Lord of Hyderabad wants to visit Germany secretly, which is obviously not that simple. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 924, Divide India. India has hundreds of states, large and small. During the British rule of India, these states formed a loose federal relationship with the United Kingdom. The states joined the Commonwealth and enjoyed autonomy. However, foreign affairs and national defense need to be controlled by the United Kingdom, are almost semi-independent. These states account for almost half of India's territory and 1/3 of the population. These state owners not only dominate their respective states, but also have great influence. After all, those Indians are already accustomed to being ruled by the ruler of the country. Imperial Foreign Minister Vahid introduced to everyone. Because India has always been a British colony before, and the Germans probably never thought that they would one day be able to incorporate this fertile colony of India into their own rule. So, not much is known about India. Your Majesty, it seems that those landlords want to change their families, Prime Minister Bismarck said. Qin Tian nodded. Then, do you think we should accept these landlords? Your Majesty, I think we can accept the refuge of these sovereigns. After all, India is too far away from the Empire. It is very difficult and troublesome for the Empire to rule India directly. What's more, under the influence of the Congress Party and other parties, there are already many Indians who want to be independent. It is foreseeable that once the Empire rules India, it may face endless resistance. In this case, it is very detrimental to the Empire's profit from India. Those landlords are all the local bosses in India. Let them manage India, and the Empire only needs to sit back and reap the benefits. In this way, the Empire will undoubtedly obtain the greatest benefits. Foreign Minister Vahid said. This is a good way, Your Majesty. In this way, the Empire will not have to pay attention to the resistance of those Indians. It is enough to let those local lords suppress those Indian natives who dare to resist. In this way, the empire can get out of it come out. Marshal von Falkenhayn also said, okay, since everyone agrees with this method, let's do it this way. We agree to visit Germany with the Lord of Hyderabad. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs will contact him secretly first, and then we will see the situation. I will see what to do. Don't meet him personally. Qin Tian said. Yes, Your Majesty. The ministers all replied. Mir Osman Ali Khan from Hyderabad was very excited when he received a reply from Germany allowing him to visit. With only a few entourages, he secretly went to Germany with the help of the German army. The Indian Ocean Fleet of the German Navy provided great convenience for Mir Osman Ali Khan's visit this time, and specially arranged for a light cruiser to send him to Germany. This made Mir Osman Ali Khan set foot on German soil half a month later. Imperial Foreign Minister Vahid personally greeted Mir Osman Ali Khan in Wilhelmshaven, which flattered him even more. After all, when the British ruled India, although their dominance was maintained, they didn't actually have much power. At most, they have a very rich net worth, which can make them enjoy the glory and wealth. However, in terms of political power, they have no status. The British would not look them in the eye either. Your Excellency, welcome to the German Empire. Wahid smiled. Although, Mir Osman Ali Khan is a ruler of Hyderabad, also known as the Great Monarch. However, Wahid did not call him His Majesty. Your Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs, I'm very grateful to the German Empire for agreeing to my secret visit. Mir Osman Ali Khan said. After some pleasantries, Wahid invited Mir Osman Ali Khan to board the special train to Berlin. The two of them were in the luxury compartment of the special train, and the conversation also entered the topic. Your Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs, congratulations to your country's army on the victory in the Indian battlefield. Mir Osman Ali Khan said. He didn't seem to mind the Germans killing so many Indians on the battlefield. He didn't regard those Indians as his compatriots at all. They were just some untouchables, and when they died, they died. It was no big deal. Thank you, sir. We don't want to fight either, but unfortunately, the British provoked the relationship between the Empire and India, causing many Indians who did not know the truth to fight against the Empire. This made a large number of Indians die on the battlefield in this war. The Empire deeply regrets this. Wahid said. It's all the fault of the British. It's all caused by them. Mir Osman Ali Khan said through gritted teeth. Yes, it's all caused by the British. A smile appeared on Wahid's face. Apparently, this two-bang lord is a smart man. And the German Empire is also the most willing to cooperate with smart people. Your Excellency the Foreign Secretary, the British rule in India was originally unpopular. Now, Germany has replaced Britain and ruled India. We welcome this very much. However, we hope that the German Empire can maintain the status quo in India. Mir Osman Ali Khan said. Obviously, Mir Osman Ali Khan does not represent himself, but a group of people. Without thinking about it, he knew that he represented the interests of many landlords. Your Excellency, now I can tell you very clearly, the German Empire has no intention of changing the status quo in India. The interests of the various states will be guaranteed. Of course, if they want independence, the Empire will never agree. Wahid said. Mir Osman Ali Khan's face was immediately filled with smiles. The affirmative reply from the German made him very satisfied. As long as their own interests are guaranteed, they are very satisfied. As for independence, what good would that do them? Your Excellency, please rest assured that the states in India are firmly opposed to independence. Mir Osman Ali Khan patted his chest and promised. Mir Osman Ali Khan was already very satisfied with being able to get Germany's promise to ensure the interests of his own country. As for independence, that is just a trick played by those pariahs and poor ghosts. If it really becomes independent, then who will guarantee the interests of these native states? It is better to keep the status quo, so that they can continue to enjoy the glory and wealth. Mir Osman Ali Khan's performance also made Wahid very satisfied. It is undoubtedly the best thing for these landlords to be content with the status quo. In this case, it will be impossible for those Indians who want to be independent. Even in order to further ensure the empire's rule in India, India can be divided. A divided India will be even more unable to resist German rule. Chapter 925, Huge Wealth. Your Majesty, I had a very pleasant conversation with Mir Osman Ali Khan. The attitude of the group of Indian sovereigns he represents is very clear. That is, as long as their interests can be guaranteed, they are willing to submit to the empire. Moreover, they will not pursue India's independence. Imperial Foreign Minister Vahid reported to Qin Tian. Qin Tian nodded. Well, they have such an attitude. It is undoubtedly the best. India is too far away from the empire. In addition, Indian people's wisdom is gradually developing, and more people will demand independence. *ESTABLISHED. The empire wants to occupy India because it wants to obtain a lot of wealth from India, rather than sinking into a quagmire. In that case, it will be very detrimental to the empire. If those Indian sovereigns work for the empire, it will save the empire a lot. From the standpoint of the German Empire, they naturally do not want India to gain independence. However, Indians are no longer as foolish as they were before, and the influence of those from the Congress Party and the Green Party alliance is growing. If their goal of independence is not achieved, they will soon turn from peaceful operations to violent ones. At that time, you don't need to think about it. Those enemies of the empire will definitely do everything possible to support those guys. They will never watch the empire grab wealth from India wantonly and then become more powerful. Therefore, they will definitely enjoy it if they can make trouble for the empire in India. At that time, India will definitely become wars everywhere. Once India becomes chaotic, Germany will no longer be able to benefit from India. At that time, I'm afraid it will become a burden to the German Empire. India will also become a chicken rib, tasteless to eat, and a pity to discard. If it is possible to withdraw from the rule of India, only gain benefits, and hand over other affairs to those local lords, it will undoubtedly be very beneficial to the German Empire. After all, it has nothing to do with Germany to let those landlords deal with those who vainly seeking independence. At most, Germany is hiding behind and providing weapons and equipment to those landlords. Everyone, I have a proposal. Doesn't the territory of those landowners account for 45% of 1 degree? It's already almost half. Just like this, we will distribute the remaining land in India to those landowners. Lord, let them rule those lands instead of the empire. In this way, the empire can completely withdraw from India. Qin Tian suggested. Your Majesty, wouldn't this be too cheap for those landlords? The ordinary land left in India is the essence, the most fertile land. After the Mughal dynasty was destroyed by the British came. We can directly rule those territories. If we hand over those territories to the Indian lords, they will get a big deal, Prime Minister Billow said. Of course, I know those landlords have long coveted those territories. If they want those territories, then they have to pay a certain price. Gold, silver, jewelry, or cash. Use those landlords in exchange for the wealth accumulated over countless years. You know, those landlords are very rich. Mir Osman Ali Khan alone has a net worth of at least tens of billions of marks. If the empire is willing to give him a piece in cash with a land as large as some territory, would he be willing to contribute all his wealth to the empire? Qin Tian asked. God, India is really a rich place. Even a landlord has so much wealth. The imperial finance minister sighed. Although Germany received a large amount of war reparations from the World War, there are many places where Germany needs money, especially in order to absorb and digest the territory of Eastern Europe obtained from this war. Many large projects have been launched. Coupled with the improvement of people's livelihood, the reorganization of the army, the upgrading of weapons and equipment, etc., it can be said that spending money is like flowing water. If a large amount of wealth can be obtained from those landlords, this will undoubtedly greatly improve the empire's finances. India has nearly 600 land states, large and small. If those land state owners can hand over their wealth to the empire is estimated to be able to obtain wealth of hundreds of billions of marks from them, or even more. The Prime Minister of the Empire Billow also said. Suddenly, everyone's breathing became a little short. That means hundreds of billions of marks or even more wealth. If the empire can get that much wealth from India, the empire will take off again. The gap between the empire and the United States, which is closely following the empire, will widen once again. At that time, it will be impossible for the Americans to surpass the empire. Majesty, the land in India is not of much use to us at all. It can be handed over to those landlords. As long as they are willing to buy it with money, then give it to them. Imperial Army Minister-in-Chief of General Staff Feng Wei Marshal Falkenhayn said, if the empire can have such a wealth, then the overall strength of the empire will once again rise by a large margin. The dominance of the empire will become more stable. It is simply impossible for other countries to challenge the hegemony of the empire. Yes, Your Majesty. I also agree to sell those lands to those landlords in exchange for a lot of wealth. Marshal Rian Hadshir, Minister of the Navy, also said, the Imperial Navy is designing a newer type of aircraft carrier. A single aircraft carrier is not capable of combat and must be matched with carrier-based aircraft. At the same time, there must be various **** warships, which makes the cost of an aircraft carrier battle group very high. If the German Navy wants to form more than a dozen aircraft carrier battle groups, the required funds will be astronomical. In addition, annual maintenance also costs a lot of money. If there is no other funds, the German Navy may have to continue to tighten its belt. If a huge amount of wealth can be obtained from India, then the life of the Imperial Navy will be much easier. The other military and political ministers of the empire also agreed to let those lands be sold to those landlords in exchange for huge wealth. If India is closer to Germany, then it is undoubtedly more beneficial to rule India directly. However, India is too far away from Germany, and Germany does not want to spend more energy in India. In this case, it is undoubtedly the best way to exchange those lands in India for huge wealth. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.